Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Happy Thursday to everybody. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, and I'm very excited to be joining you this evening. Hopefully everyone's doing well. We got some of our usual suspects in chat. We've got some people already showing their love for Hackmaster. I've got some Hackmaster books sitting unopened on the bookshelf. The truest form of love. Henry's excited. He says, oh, hell yes. Mark says, I'm finally learning from Steven a decent title that makes you want to click. No, that is not clickbait. Number one, this is the 5th edition of Hackmaster, and it came out in 2011, so it came out before 5th edition. Number two, I'm just quoting the book, literally. The book says this is the greatest role-playing game ever made by mankind. So if anything, I am just being very boring and just copying the copy. Ron Rittner is here, and he says, you know I'm excited. Yeah, buddy, I'm sure you are. If it's Hackmaster the slot machine, that'd be a nice one, buddy. Roll for Combat is here. He says, wow, you are digging deep if you are covering this game. And we will get into this because I want to paint an entire picture for you, not just about the game Hackmaster itself, but actually how it was kind of a really important part of the history of tabletop role-playing games for the last 25 years. So it's actually a really kind of important story to tell. And so we'll kind of go through this. Quark has the rule book because he was a big KOTD fan, and we're going to talk about the Knights of the Dinner Table first. I mean, that's actually where we're going to begin our story with Jolly Blackburn and Shadis Magazine and the Knights of Dinner Table. Pumpkin's here and Pumpkin's gone because he's playing Dragonbane as everyone else is. What is up, KC? Yo to you. Zerverus, hello. Yeah, we'll talk about that, Casey. It's a little confusing. Calamakis is here. Hello. Zerverus, what's up? Tundalus is here. Excited for this one. Ooh, a classic. Okay. See, Steven's showing his real nerd cred. He still has a Knights of Dinner Table subscription. I love it, but this game is too much. Yes, just the 5th edition of Hackmaster. But what makes it confusing, Casey, is that there was no 1st, 2nd, or 3rd edition of Hackmaster. The very first publication of Hackmaster was 4th edition. So don't worry, we'll cover it all. It's a little confusing. I know. Olaf says, by popular demand. And yes, Olaf, great question. I want to talk about that. Tonight, as with so many of our Thursday streams, the Patreon, members of the Knights of Last Call Patreon voted for, I let them choose, my patrons can submit topics and everybody gets to vote on. And they voted for tonight to be covering Marvel Multiverse, the superhero Marvel game that came out just this last year. Hackmaster came in second. So why aren't we covering Marvel Multiverse? Because they don't do PDFs. And it's a first look. I own the physical book, but a big part of the first look experience is me reading through it with you all and you getting to see the book as well. Unfortunately, they chose to strike an exclusive deal with Roll20, and you cannot buy the game in PDF. You can get it on a Kindle. I don't have a Kindle account. You can get it on Nexus. I don't have a Nexus account. You can get it on Roll20. And I, as a general rule of thumb, do not like paying $30, $40 for a digital PDF. But if I am going to buy a $30 or $40 digital document, I definitely do not want it to be proprietary to a single platform. At least PDF is, in theory, usable for all time. Tell me about my Kindle books or my Nexus account if Nexus goes down or if Roll20 goes down. So very disappointed with that element, that development. So anyways, we have a $25 super chat goal, which will say we'll try to do it despite the no PDF. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how we would do it. I guess I have the physical book. We could set up a camera over here like we used to in the one all bookshelf ranked. But anyways. Good evening, Keith. Hello, hello. Ken, hi, Derek. Has anyone ever played this game? I have played this game. I have played 4th edition Hackmaster, and I have played 5th edition Hackmaster at Gen Con. I have never actually run a home game of 5th edition Hackmaster, to my knowledge. Torres, Loof Torres, always here, never talk. Well, Loof, you talked this time. Welcome. Voinapala. Just want to make you squirm by trying to pronounce my YouTube name. Success. It's going to drop out soon. Well, thank you for stopping by. Not any more confusing than D&D. The so-called 5th edition is actually what, like the 7th or 8th edition? Yeah, depending on how you want to do that, right? The 0th edition, 1st edition. Well, there was a 0th edition, you know. Okay, so let's kind of get started first by talking about Jolly Blackburn and the Knights of the Dinner Table. And if you're not familiar with the Knights of the Dinner Table, let me add something here real quick, just so people can know who we're talking about. Boom. Okay, here we go. Covering up my whole space. So these are the Knights of the Dinner Table. It's a comic that is produced by Kenzer and Co. And this comic has been around since the 90s and used to be in Dragon Magazine for a while. They used to be a small, short little clip of it every month in Dragon Magazine. But it also got published as its own independent comic, and it would even get bundled up into trade paperbacks called Bundles of Trouble. And this, the world of the Knights of the Dinner Table is kind of a, you know, an homage and a satire of like that classic 80s, 90s kind of grognardy, kind of car oppy, kind of murder hobo, you know, D&D type character. And so you've got B.A., who is the beleaguered GM, always at his wit's end. And then you have Bob, the gentleman in the first player position, who plays Knuckles, the dwarf, and likes to waste him with his crossbow. And then next to Bob is a character named Dave, who ironically is a lot like our Bob. Dave doesn't really know the rules. He just wants to hack and slash. He doesn't care about anything. He just wants to get like treasure and kill things. Then poor Sarah is next. And Sarah usually plays a cleric named Justinia. And she tries to roleplay and tries to be like the voice of reason. And then the final character all the way in the end is Brian, who plays a wizard, a mage named Teflon Billy, who is like the, you know, consummate car opper, min-maxer, knows all the rules, is rules lawyering, you know, doing all that other stuff. So this world, this comic was designed to sort of poke fun at and make fun of, you know, some of the tropes and some of the things about D&D. And because it was a satire, you know, for example, very famously, the game that they play is called Hackmaster. And obviously, and in a comic in the 90s, the characters played Hackmaster 3rd edition. And they never really explained the rules. Like, you know, they would sometimes reference the rules in the comic book, but it was definitely an attempt, in my opinion, to sort of make fun of the complexity and some of the weird eccentricities that happened, especially in the first edition of AD&D, right? The one that Gary Gygax made, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the kind of classic book. Both the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook are filled with all sorts of very sometimes confusing and you know the Dungeon Master's Guide has like 3 or 4 different types of hirelings. Like there's hirelings, there's henchmen, there's, you know, mercenaries, there's experts, there's like a whole thing. Just so many weird esoteric rules. And so the game made fun of that. The comic made fun of that. And in fact, even the person who created Hackmaster and was the current owner of the company was a character by the name of Gary Jackson, which was a combination of both Gary Gygax, but also Steve Jackson, who was the other famous sort of savant game designer of the 80s and the 90s. And, you know, Steve Jackson Games. So Knights of the Dinner Table, funny comic. And that is how it goes. Cut to 2001. So in 2001, this is why this is important in the annals of modern role-playing game history. And by that, I mean like the last 2 decades. In 2001, obviously in 2000, Wizards of the Coast released Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition. All right. And as a result of releasing 3rd edition, with 3rd edition came the Open Gaming License, the OGL. Now, due to the seemingly openness of the OGL, the folks over at Kenzer and Co. Had this idea that maybe they could use that OGL to produce a real version of Hackmaster as a parody, as a joke. In fact, they felt like, because if you're familiar with copyright law, you know that you can use other people's likenesses and other people's things as long as it's a work of parody, right? It's a work of comedy. You're allowed to make fun of stuff, and then people can't say you're stealing it or copying it. And the people at Kenzer, obviously 3rd edition D&D had just come out, but 3rd edition D&D was kind of a radical departure from 1st edition and 2nd edition D&D in many ways. And so with their game, they created a game. They created this. Now, this is the original player's handbook for Hackmaster. And actually, hold on a sec. I'm going to swip over here. Okay. So there you go. That's the original player's handbook of Hackmaster. And this book is a work of parody. Okay. And specifically, it is designed to sort of, and they called it Hackmaster 4th edition because in the comics, right, they had always referred to it as Hackmaster 3rd edition. And since they were finally releasing the game, they were like, oh yeah, this is the new edition of the game. We'll put it in the comic as the new edition of the game. And this version of the game is basically a very, very deliberately funny, tropey, weird, stupid, crazy version of basically AD&D 1st edition and 2nd edition. And Grim Prism, that is a very good observation. The cover art for this is basically a play on the classic Player's Handbook cover art where the characters have infiltrated the temple, killed some lizardmen, and are going to loot the ruby-eyed demon statue. So it's very much an homage to that old school, style of game. And of course, it's obviously very, very kind of, it's over the top with its graphical violence. You can see that the, people are just being hacked apart and ripped apart because again, the game was trying to be kind of funny and lean into the murder hobo. Oh my God, AD&D is so confusing and the rules are so obtuse. And like, it was trying to be that way deliberately. Now, I have played this game before, and I recall one specific character that someone made, because in this game, you could take flaws for your character that give you more points so that you can take better things. And this character was afraid of the dark, and they were narcoleptic. And so randomly, during the adventure, including a fight, they would fall asleep. But then when they were falling asleep, it would get dark, and then they would terrify themselves back awake. So the game is not in an attempt in any sort of stretch of the imagination to be what I would say serious. As an example, here's one of the supplements for Hackmaster 4th edition. This would be the kind of warrior or fighter book. This was Hackmaster, the combatant's guide to slaughtering foes, driving your enemies before you and hearing the lamentation of their women. Yes, this is a real book. Not just a digital one. It's a real book. I own it. I do own the Combatant's Guide to Slaughtering Foes. And so, again, can you play this version of the game? Absolutely. But I would honestly say this. It's fun to play as someone who had played the old school D&D, and you get to kind of laugh at how silly and awesome it is. Case in point, I'm going to go back to my main screen real quick. This is the Game Master screen, okay? I'll show you the back of it, okay? It has several panels, okay? But it also has critical hit charts, okay, that flip up to access more. It's a D10,000 critically. Oh, hold on a sec. Here we go. There we go. It's a D10,000 critical hit chance You have to roll a D10,000 and then consult this based off of the weapon severity factor. You can see that there's also like a Vitruvian man symbol there down at the bottom so that you can properly determine where the critical hit location is. This game was, a work of parody. This is one of my favorite things here. This is the pizza matrix. You fill this out with your players and yourself, and then you rate the toppings, and that way you can determine which pizza you should order. So anyways, a D10,000 is a golf ball. I mean, a D100 already looks a lot like a golf ball, so a D10,000 would be insane. Okay, so Hackmaster 4th edition came out, but again, I said it was important. Why was it important? Well, number one, believe it or not, it won the Origins Award for Best Game in 2001. They put it on this book because this book did not win the Origins Award, but the main book, the core rule book of Hackmaster, it won the Origins Award for 2001 because they were like, hey, look at this. Someone kind of remade D&D. And when that happened, people realized, hey, wait a second. We can use the OGL to make and use the rules from D&D. We don't have to make it a parody. We can just play the game that we want to play. So this led, to eventually a couple years later of the publication of the old school reference index compilation, right? Which is also called OSRIC, which basically was the very first retro clone. But I argue, that this book was the very first retro clone because this used the rules of AD&D. It changed them. It added some things. Sure, it made fun of a lot of things and kind of leaned into some of the classic funny tropes that people associate with D&D and the classic style of play. But this was the first retro clone. And when this came out and was a success and won an award and people were really, buzzing about it, I believe that the, industry took note. And as the third edition of D&D continued to sort of go forward and eventually into 4th edition, people realized, hey, we could use this OGL to just copy the old rules and some of the old concepts of D&D and publish them. And that is how you got OSRIC, which was the very first old school, which again was just literally a reprinting of the rules because at the time Wizards of the Coast was not printing any of those rules. And that's how you got Labyrinth Lord and Sword and Wizardry. And, eventually you got to, the Black Hack and the White Hack and all these different games, which is, really kind of in a way become its own, universe. But it all started here with Hackmaster. Okay. Now, this is Hackmaster 4th edition, a deliberate parody. But today, we are going to talk about Hackmaster 5th edition. Now, after being out for a number of years, I think the people at Kenzer and Company, they knew that this game was sort of a joke. But they were like, you know what? But like, it's our game. We should try to make a real version of Hackmaster without. It's still going to be a little irreverent. It's still going to be a little tongue in cheek. It's still going to be a little bit eye rolly at times in the complexity of the game. That cannot be denied. Okay. This is not something they did not try to like completely reverse the pendulum here, but they did say we understood that we created Hackmaster 4th edition to be a parody. Let's make a version of Hackmaster that we think is at least more serious playable. There's a term that we use a lot here for Kaz on the channel. It says it's like, I'm not serious, but I'm sincere. And I would say that this game kind of falls into that bucket, right? It's not trying to be serious, but it is sincere in its way that it's presented and the way that it sort of rolls out. And we talked a little bit about Hackmaster on the channel the other day when we were talking about initiative systems. And I think that's what got people so excited. So specifically, by the way, and we'll get into this, this came out first. In fact, I remember picking this up at Gen Con many years ago. So this is Hackmaster Basic, okay? This does not contain all of the rules for the entire game of Hackmaster. And this came out a good year, maybe a year or two before eventually they came out with this bad boy. Okay. Now this is the advanced Hackmaster player guide. Okay. This is the basic book and this is the advanced guide. Okay. And so, tonight we're going to use basic as just a good way to sort of introduce you to some of the ideas behind Hackmaster. In particular, we are going to focus a little bit on the combat, but we'll talk about some of the elements in here. But again, I think that the basic game can give you a good indication for it. Also, I should note in the doobly-doo below, we have links to our Drive-Thru-RPG affiliate link where you can buy Hackmaster or the Hackmaster Basic. There's actually two versions of Basic, and we'll talk a little bit about those. One is free and basically just has the rules. The other one is like $10 and gives you the rules plus the character creation rules. So, Trevco. BA's in the house.
Tip $10. Best game ever made.
Best game ever made. BA, obviously a strong believer in Hackmaster. So thank you for that. And with that tip, I should bring up our tip goal, $75. If there's enough interest and people want me to keep talking about this, maybe we'll bring Smith back on and we'll do a deeper dive into Hackmaster and we'll actually go into the advanced Hackmaster book, right? The big one, the huge one. So Trevco, I thought Marvel won the poll. Marvel did win the poll, Trevco. And then when I went to prepare for the stream, I discovered that the Marvel Multiverse RPG is not available as a PDF. Another tip from BA.
Tip $10 from one night to another.
Absolutely. And in fact, us being the Knights of Last Call, obviously there's a connection to Pathfinder and Golarion with the Knights of Last Wall, but the other inspiration for the name was the Knights of the Dinner Table. And so that is a legitimate truism that the knights that you know of are similar to the knights of the dinner table. So very good. Thank you, BA. But anyways, yeah, so it didn't get the reasons, Mikey, that it got skipped, Marvel, is because I don't have a digital copy of the game because they didn't release it on PDF. So again, maybe we can figure out a way to do it with some sort of rigged up camera that I can put like right here and then look down on it. But again, that's kind of difficult, especially because if I'm looking down, then I'm not watching the chat and I can't see my stream. PDFs are way, way, way better for me. So, so we had to go to the second place choice, which is Hackmaster. All right. So this is Hackmaster. And again, you could see here the obvious homage, right? This cover art, okay, should look very familiar because this is the cover art from the BX Moldvay Cook basic set of D&D released in 1981. And you can see there is a, obvious similarity. Not just an obvious similarity. They hired Errol Otis to do the art for their cover. So they literally went out and they hired, the guy who did this art to do the art for their basic book. And there we go. That's Hackmaster. So this is the basic version of Hackmaster. And, again, here's this is kind of where they talk about why did they do this and, and why they created a more serious edition. And, why this is coming out and what they're doing here. And it says, a brief word on Hackmaster's unique style and a bit of back history. When Hackmaster 4th edition came out, it earned something as a reputation among gamers as being a silly or joke game. A few quickly dismissed it as being such. A pity. Fortunately, tens of thousands of gamers were able to look beyond the veneer and recognize that there was a truly fun and unique game and quickly embraced Hackmaster as their game of choice. To clarify, our previous license required... Oh, thank you, Anonymous.
Anonymous tipped $10. Been binging past streams. Love what you're doing.
Well, cheers to you, good sir or good madam. I don't know if you meant to be anonymous, but you can go ahead and claim your tip in the chat if you want to let us know. But thank you for supporting the channel, and thank you for. I'm glad you've been binging the content. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So anyways, again, they understand that this game came out as a parody, but they wanted to do it. And so what they said is, how has this affected the new game? We reeled in and scrubbed the game of much of the over-the-top silly factor, but we decided to keep the fun. And most importantly, the attitude. So while the gameplay takes itself very serious and is rock solid as we could make it, the rules are presented with the notion, this is a game, it should be fun. It shouldn't read like a textbook, even though it kind of does sometimes. Anyways, so this is from Dave Kenzer, Jolly Blackburn, Steve Johansson, and Brian Jelke, which is the Hackmaster design team. And these guys are awesome. They're at like every Gen Con, and they're always running games. And that's how I've mostly played Hackmaster, is times throughout preloaded with Gary Jackson and JoJo Zeeks, which are fictional characters in the Hackmaster universe. But the idea here is that you get famous game designer people to sign within this box. And then there is a system, okay, to charge up a D20, all right, in order to build up a good roll or a bad roll. And there's a whole rule set to it. But basically, if you take the D20 and you stroke from left to right, that is going to give you a higher number. And if you scrub from right to left, you're going to get a lower number. People are saying YouTube is still broken. Sweet. Let's see. All right, back now. Yeah, it's just been having problems. I don't know. Let's take a look here. I mean, according to my thing, I haven't dropped any frames, and YouTube is telling me I'm healthy, so maybe there's not a problem with me. But anyways, yeah, no, everything that looks good on my end. I don't know. My stream health is excellent according to YouTube, and OBS is showing no drop frames. Anyways, I'm sorry. All right. So here we go. This is the introduction to the game. And I will read this section. I will try not to read too much sections of text in big chunks. But I think it is worth, maybe reading some of this. So here we go. Well met, friend. You've made it this far, so congratulations are certainly in order, for you've chosen the greatest game ever developed by mankind, Hackmaster. At this point, a fair warning is probably in order. In all likelihood, you cut your teeth on another game system and have picked this game up as a curiosity or plan to move to Hackmaster as a temporary or permanent change of pace. The more you play Hackmaster, the more you will come to realize that it behaves differently than other games. For most games, having some preconceived notion of what to expect or background experience makes the transition easier. This is often not so with Hackmaster. In fact, complete gaming noobs sometimes command a distinct learning curve advantage over their seasoned RPG counterparts. This is because while Hackmaster plays like an old-school game, it more closely models real life than any previous edition, old or new school, despite its fluid mechanics. So rather than spend the introduction to this exalted tome blathering about how great the designers are or how devoted Hackmaster fans are, we will simply cover some fundamental differences with which you need to become accustomed, all in the hopes of saving a few of your characters' lives. In other words, this might be the first useful introduction ever penned. Being as how I have not read them all, I usually skip them, I cannot verify or certify this as a strict truth. Here are some things that you will find different about Hackmaster than other games. You needn't ever wait for your turn. The whole game is based on the seconds system, much like timekeeping in the real world. If your character wants to take an action or change his mind in the middle of an action, by all means do it. No sense standing around. Both shields and armor make it easier for foes to hit your character. They simply absorb damage and deflect blows, making your character less likely to be injured, just like in real life. Characters use an active defense and roll to defend as well as an attack. A low roll isn't the end of the world. So you rolled a 6 against that orc? Don't whine about missing the GM's rolls for the orc. Don't whine about missing until the GM rolls for the orc's defense. You still have a chance. He might roll a 5. Going first and fastest, is not always the best. Charging into a group of surprise foes may be great for the first strike, but can also be a way to surround yourself if allies aren't as quick as you. Being surrounded or even outnumbered is very bad. Taking on multiple foes, even if inferior to your character, could be bad news. A large group of orcs will be a tough fight even for a high-level character, when in other games this would be a cakewalk. Well, it wasn't one in the Mines of Moria, and it won't be one in Hackmaster either. Ranged weapons don't work quite as well in real life or for low-level characters as they do in the most recent RPGs. Frankly, I'd rather be shot with an arrow from a longbow than hit with a broadsword if forced to make that choice. Think about it. Every character cannot do everything, and no character is an island. You need to make a team of characters. Every character class has a specific role. Fighters fight. Mages should be kept out of melee. Thieves should be on point, but ready to let the fighters take the lead. Each role is important. All the min-maxing during character creation doesn't mean a thing if you don't use your brain during the game. 3d6 in order does not mean that you get an unplayable character. Intelligence is important for melee. There are no perfect characters, but there are many ways to create a great character. You can never tell the outcome of a battle before it starts. Just because your fighter is at full hit points, killing that goblin with a spear is never a sure thing. Simply because you've encountered goblins, kobolds, or zombies in other games doesn't mean they're easy to kill or defeat in Hackmaster. And the GM is not out to kill you. He's out to kill you if you are foolish. A tactical withdrawal is a perfectly acceptable option because far more often than in other games, you will wind up over your head. In the end, the best advice I can give you is that Hackmaster is a game of difficult choices. You will never have enough building points to buy everything you want or even need. There is no one no-brainer weapon that every combatant should use, nor is there one class that bests them all. The best advice is to just play the game with an open mind, ready to learn. Nothing brings out the genius of Hackmaster like actual play. During play, you will see how well the system flows and works. This is a game written by people who love to play it. So you can see that they are being sincere, but there's also an edge there, right? There's sort of a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek there. So it is designed to be purposefully like, again, there's that phrase, right? High Gygaxian. And again, you cannot take this as like an attempt to be serious. But there's an attitude there that they try to imply to the game, which is, again, doesn't mean that they're not being sincere and trying to create a legitimate game, but they're also trying to create a certain stylistic tone. For sure. All right. So, people are having problems. Hopefully they are not. Just freezes every so often, not the end of the world. The VODs are fine, so I think it's YouTube sending the stream out rather than the stream capture. Well, that's good, Shadram. Yeah, because again, from my end, the stream looks very healthy. But if it's getting to the server and then having problems getting out to everybody else, that would be why the VODs are fine. So, let's see here. All right. Gosh, hearing this reminds me of all the great things I've heard about this game. Again, it's not for everybody. There's a tone to it. All right. So here, this is the basic rule set, okay? Only 230 pages as opposed to the primary rule set, which is like 500 pages. So what we're going to talk about a little bit here is we're going to talk about the characters. We're going to talk about combat. We might talk about some of the skills and some of the other concepts of this game, but that will remain to see if we actually reach our tip goals. But we can talk about some of the other stuff. But again, remember, we're just trying to cover the basics of this game. Now, this is why a new edition, right? You're like, didn't they already cover this in the beginning? That first Why a New Edition was written by the legitimate authors. This is written by the fake authors who the real authors of this game is called Kenzer & Co., but the fake authors of this game is called Hard 8 Enterprises. And this is like where Gary Jackson, the so-called genius inventor, game designer, is writing to you about why they're writing a new edition. So anyways, again, it's kind of a funny read for sure. So let's take a look here first at this. This is called the combat profile. And this is kind of like the basic gist or component of the game for combat. And in fact, your character sheet will have one of these, and the monster stat blocks will have one of these. This is their attempt to create a very easy to understand way to very quickly assess most of the important things about your character. So we start here with, and you would typically have one of these for each weapon that you had, okay? Or each sort of combat profile. Like this is when I'm using my sword and my shield. You would have one of these kind of pre-made. So first we'll start here at the top of the triangle, which has an attack, and the attack is +2. And so when you attack, you roll a d20 and you add your attack bonus, right? Pretty simple. We'll talk about what goes into that, but you're rolling an attack d20 and you're adding 2, and that would be your attack roll. However, the armor class, they don't really have armor class in this game. Instead, each character has a defense score, okay? And you're going to roll a d20, and you are going to then add your defense score if you are attacked. And then we compare who has the higher number. So if you have a high attack and they have a lower defense, you hit. If they have a lower defense or higher defense and you have a lower attack roll, you did not hit. If you hit, you will do your damage, which is here at the bottom, 2d8 P +3. What does P mean? Well, you'll see that on a lot of rolls. There'll be a P after it. And that means penetrating. And basically what that means, most die rolls in this game, most of them, are exploding. So you're going to roll 2d8 damage +3, but if any of your d8s are an 8, you are going to roll that d8 again and add d8 -1. Why do they add -1? Nobody knows. But basically, your exploding dice are always 1 less than your main dice. So it'll be 0 to 7. So anyways, yes, I think this is definitely based off of a materials safety data sheet. I think I remember hearing them say that before, so I do believe that that is the case, Lance. Because their argument was like, OSHA and, industry has spent millions of dollars trying to come up with the quickest and easiest and fastest way to get complex information delivered quickly. So why wouldn't we just copy that format and use that for our RPG? Okay, so you got hit. You took some damage. What about your armor? Well, armor works as a form of damage reduction in this game. And so the more armor you have, you take off some damage from your attack. So if we got hit for 5 damage, then you would take 3 damage because this character has a damage reduction of 2. All right. So that's the inside. Oh, and then the middle is, do you have a shield? And if so, what size is it? Is it a small shield, a large shield, a tower shield? That's important. Shields are really different in Hackmaster. And then around the outside, we have speed, initiative, reach, and what says top save. Speed is how often you can attack with this weapon. We covered this a little bit on our Tuesday stream, but we'll get into this later. But basically, remember, there aren't really combat rounds in this game. Everything happens in seconds, and everybody basically gets to go every second. Your character, once they're engaged in melee, can attack every 8 seconds. That's what a speed of 8 means, okay? Initiative +2 is when the fight starts, you're going to roll a die and add your initiative modifier. In this case, high initiative is bad. And that's going to determine at what second your character stops being kind of surprised and flat-footed. So like if your character rolls, if your initiative is if you roll a 3 and you add 2, you have 5. It means that for the first 4 seconds of the fight, your character's kind of bewildered and they're kind of looking around. You're essentially, surprised or flat-footed. And then once we reach initiative once we reach the 5th second, your character can start going. Reach determines if 2 people come together to start engaging in melee, who gets to make the first attack? The character with the greater reach. And then top save. Top stands for threshold of pain. If your character suffers a severe wound, you have to make this save, and you have to roll a d20, and you have to roll less than or equal to this. If you fail to do so, your character isn't dead, but you're basically like stunned or shocked by the pain, and your character basically stops functioning for a number of seconds as you sort of writhe on the ground unceremoniously. So let's take a step back here and think about this from an old school perspective. Why do they have this in this game? Obviously, it's because it's kind of funny that, you know, you hit somebody and they just basically double over in pain. But the real reason they do this is because this game still kind of adheres to that older school mentality where hit points represent a more of a long-term ablative resource over the course of an entire day of adventuring or an entire, session of dungeon delving. We're used to sort of modern games like Pathfinder 2nd Edition where, your hit points are essentially an encounter-based resource. You're kind of expected to kind of burn through a lot of them or all of them, and then you get them all back at the end of the fight. That is not the case with classic D&D. In classic D&D, your character, after gaining some levels, might have like 20 or 30 hit points, but you're not expected to go into a fight and ever lose 20 or 30 hit points. It could happen. Instead, you might be expected to lose 5 or 10 hit points, but after a couple of fights, healing isn't as easy in those older editions. So now you're getting into a fight and you're down to 12. And now things start to get a little dicey. Maybe my character might bite the bullet. The threshold of pain exists because this way, even if your character is at full hit points, if you take a really nasty hit, your character basically is still affected. They're immediately effective because in this game, you die at 0. There is no negative hit points. So they wanted to have some sort of way to sort of represent almost kind of like you getting taken out, but not like in a permanent, you're unconscious and bleeding to death way, just in a, you've been hit so hard. That Mines of Moria scene where Boromir and Aragorn and all them are fighting the cave troll. And I think Boromir gets whipped across the battlefield by the cave troll. He slams into one of the stone piers and is just laying there like completely zonked out of it. And an orc or goblin is about to kill him. And Aragorn throws his sword across the battlefield and kills the goblin before it can basically coup de grace Boromir. That exact scene is what threshold of pain is supposed to sort of represent. Yes, your character has 50 hit points and you just took 20 damage. You still have 30 hit points left. You're like, right, whatever, doesn't matter. But no, like the game was like, no, you just got hit with a big hit. And so we want to sort of reflect that. Okay. So anyways, this is the combat profile for a character in Hackmaster, and the monsters all have these in the bestiaries and the adventures. And to be honest with you, it does a pretty good job of sort of giving you most of the information that you'll need. That being said, the game is a lot more complex than this, but let's call it what it is. All right. So let's take a look here. This is sort of comparing the editions. So we're looking here at Hackmaster Basic. There's also Hackmaster Basic Plus, which we have a link to below. And there's the Hackmaster Full Advanced Player's Handbook. And basically, the Basic only gives you character rules up to 5th level. The Basic Plus takes you to 10th. And the Player's Handbook takes you all the way to 20th level. You can also see that the special combat moves, enhanced death and dying rules, fighting styles, mounted combat, called shots, unarmed combat, new character classes like the Knight, the Paladin, the Barbarian, the Ranger, the Rogue, the Assassin, multi-class PCs, and 9 new clerical orders are all in the advanced book, along with new races like Gnomes, Gnome Titans, Grell, Half-Elves, half Hobgoblins, and half Orcs. More quirks and flaws, better armor and equipment section, more skills, more talents, and all of the character creation rules. So that is what you get in Basic, and that is what you get in Advanced Hackmaster. All right. Little advertising blurb. Okay. So here is an example of a character in Hackmaster. As we can see here, we have, as we might expect here on the top, we have our class, which is Fighter. We are level 1. There's a space for alignment. Alignment is very important in Hackmaster. It takes it very seriously. We have our race, a gender, age, height, weight, hair, eyes, any gods that we are patroned by. What are we and what handedness are we? Why does it matter what handedness I am? Well, you might get your arm cut off. And if your arm gets cut off, we'd have to know which arm it got cut off, and maybe you won't be able to use that arm for a while. Down the left side, we can see our character abilities. These are very similar to D&D. And you might say, what is LKS? Well, if you know first edition on Dungeons & Dragons, you'll know that at some point they introduced a 7th ability score, which was called comeliness. Not exactly the best name for a term, but it was called comeliness, and it basically meant how good your character looked. So in this game, they kept that, and they called it looks, which is why it's called LKS. So we have strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, looks, and charisma. Now, when you're making a character in the character creation, you are going to roll 3d6 in order. Again, this is like an old school game, and they say, look, this game is built around the average being, 10, 11, 12. You don't have to have an 18 or 16 in order to function. You'll also see that after each ability score is a percentage. This is basically when you level up, you can put points into that percentage, and that percentage will go up. And if that percentage gets to 100, it resets back down to 0, and your main ability score goes up by 1. So it's really just sort of a way of like tracking fraction. It's almost kind of like in the modern day Pathfinder 2 in the remaster, right? How you have to sort of track whether or not you boosted something. This is kind of the same way of doing it. You basically, as you level up, you can put some of your, when you level up, you get these things called build points, and you could put them into these ability scores. And the more you put in, the more the ability scores will go up. All right, so let's take a look. What do our ability scores do? So there's a couple very interesting things about this game that are very different than what you might be thinking about from a normal D&D game. All right, let's start with strength. The first thing we'll see is it modifies your damage. So if you have a higher strength, you will do more damage in melee with a melee weapon, right? We all understand that. Okay. Next is the feat of strength modifier. What does that basically mean? It basically means if your character tries to bend bars or lift gates or try to do something really, really impressive or awesome, you're going to add that to a D20 roll. You can almost think of this as very similar to what we use, ability modifiers for in 3rd edition D&D, 4th edition D&D, 5th edition D&D, but it's specifically for strength. We also see how much our character can lift, how much they can carry, and how much they can drag. Okay, so strength, fairly normal. Then we get to intelligence. And this is where the first big difference comes out. Your attack modifier is modified by your intelligence, not your strength. Strength only affects damage. Intelligence is added to your attacks, both ranged and melee. A clever, smart, observant, strategic, tactical character is going to have a better attack roll than the big, stupid idiot. So again, while strength may affect damage, it is intelligence that affects your attack modifier, which obviously is pretty wild, but it kind of makes sense, right? I think it makes sense. All right, next, wisdom. And here we can see 2 modifiers for wisdom. Initiative modifier. So it's not just dexterity in this game, right? We think of initiative, we think of reaction speed, right? Which is physical, but it's also how observant are you? How perceptive are you? Do you see that people are starting to move? And so in this game, while dexterity does affect your initiative modifier, so does your wisdom. So if you have a really high wisdom or a really high dex or both, your character is going to be able to react much faster than other characters because you're able to perceive. The same thing is true for defense. Remember, in this game, armor and shields aren't used to avoid getting hit. Actually, wearing really heavy, bulky armor actually makes you easier to hit. The reason why you wear armor isn't to avoid being hit at all. It's so that when you do get hit, and presumably you're going to get hit more often, but it won't do anything. The armor will absorb the damage, or the shield will just outright deflect the blow. Defense in this game is literally, the ability to see an attack coming and dodge out of the way of it completely. And so in this game, defense, remember, an attack roll is someone's attack roll versus someone's defense roll. It's an opposed roll. So whoever rolls higher, gets the success. And wisdom and dexterity both affect your defense. So then we get to dexterity, which is still kind of a broken stat. Dexterity affects your initiative, how fast you go, your attack modifier, even in melee and in range, melee and ranged. Okay. A character who is more accurate, more nimble, more precise, more dexterous is going to have an easier time landing blows than a character who is not. But it also affects your defense modifier. So again, dexterity is pretty good. Constitution affects your hit points. And again, remember, this is the basics. That's why they don't put stuff that doesn't really matter, because this is a pre-generated character. Its hit points have already been figured out for you, so you don't really need to know it. But Constitution affects your hit points. Charisma and looks can affect your ability to influence people and how well you are perceived. And they also affect your honor, which again, if you're familiar with original D&D from the 80s, you will know that the original D&D character sheets that came out. Let me see if I can find them really quickly here. Let's see. First edition AD&D character sheets. Let's take a look here. Let's see if we have the old school original ones. No, that's basic. They had a spot on them for your character's honor, believe it or not. They just, again, they brought that over into the modern game. Anyways, so that is how ability scores work in this game. All right. So in this case, we've got, I don't even know what this character is. This is a human fighter. So they have 2 weapons. They have a long sword and a dagger, right? And we can see here that they have 2 combat profiles. They have profile 1 for their sword, and they have profile 2 for their dagger. Okay. And that basically tells them everything that they need to know. This character is wearing leather armor. So if they are struck, they will take 2 points of damage off. They have a small shield, which gives them a +4 to their defense, and it absorbs 4 hit points of damage. And they have 31 hit points. All right, so now we get into these are all the little tiny things. What the hell is this chart mean? Okay, this part here is really, really. I think this is really cool. You either love this or you hate this. Hold on a second. We might need to go to the whiteboard on this one. All right, let me get my whiteboard going. What's going on here? Whiteboard, come on. All right, there we go. She's coming online. All right. All right. Okay. All right. You all know it already. Okay. There she is. All right. So, do not show this for new whiteboards. Let's go back to, we've got this wound box. So here's the way this game works. Let's say that we're playing and I got hit for 7 damage. Okay, a monster hit me. They rolled higher than my defense. I got hit for 7 damage. Remember, our character had leather armor, so that takes off 2 points of damage. So they basically just took a 5-point damage wound. And so we would write 5. Okay? Now, obviously, our hit points are now down to 26. But we have to track that wound, okay? Let's say we get hit again. This time we get hit for 3 damage, which again, we're wearing leather armor, which takes 2 points of damage off. So that gets reduced down to 1. And so our hit points go from 26 to 25. But we've taken a second wound, 1 point of damage. Then we get hit for an absolute massive blow. This would probably cause us to pass out from the pain and the shock. Let's say we take a massive 20 points of damage. Somebody critically hit us and just destroyed us utterly. Well, we reduce that down to 18 because we take 2 points of damage off. So we're taking 18 off. We're down to 7 hit points, but then we note that we have an 18 damage wound. All right. Luckily, we are able to survive the fight and we win. Okay. So how do we get hit points back? Oh, I go take a long rest and all of my hit points come back? No. Each wound heals 1 hit point per day. Now, it's not that you heal 1 hit point per day. Each wound heals 1 hit point per day. So what that means, okay, is that after, and again, the advanced game has even more detailed rules for this. So I'm just kind of making like the sort of the basic way of it. But what this means is that after 1 day of healing, this 5 damage wound has gone down to 4. This 1 damage wound is 0. This wound's actually completely gone. And this one is down to 17. So my hit points are now be at 10. This 17 damage wound is going to stick around for 17 days. I will not be able to get my full hit points back until after 17 days of healing. So what this means, by the way, is that if my character, okay, takes that if a character takes a 10 hit point damage attack and they take 10 damage, then that will take 10 days to heal up. Okay, right? It's a nasty wound. That's going to take you over a week to heal up. But the same character could get 2, 2, 2, and 2. They've still taken 10 damage. But these are all just like scratches that barely made it through the armor. Just maybe it's just a flesh wound, right? This character will be able to heal all of their hit points back in just 2 days, because after the first day, these will all go to 1. And then after the second day, these will all go to 0 and the wound will be completely removed. So taking 10 damage in one blow is worse for you than taking 10 damage, a penny and a nickel at a time, because it's going to heal faster. So, again, it's a kind of minutia and kind of, I don't know, kind of stupid. Yeah. But it's also kind of sweet, right? Like it kind of sells that kind of gritty realism. And it means that when your character, again, hit points, we always know are this abstract concept, but it sort of brings up this idea that when your character does get hit with like a really big attack, that is something that is going to matter. It's going to linger on, for a number of days, maybe even weeks potentially. So I think that is really, really cool. And that is how this track charts, because you could see, when we think about first edition AD&D, right, we're thinking about characters that have like 5 hit points and 4 hit points. So you could see that this character is a level 1 character and they have 31 hit points. So, Hackmaster does make your characters have that sort of more beef. But that is, like I said, that is why because they want that sort of ablative grindingness. And that's why they introduce things like the threshold of pain, because they don't want your character to feel like a superhero, right? This is definitely not a game that is trying to make your character feel like a superhero. Okay. So that is how hit points work, how damage works. Okay. And we can see here our character's threshold of pain. So we do not want to take 10 damage. If we take 10 more damage in a hit, then potentially our character might basically drop to the ground and, kind of spasm out. All right. And then here's our combat profile with our different weapons. Again, we're not going to get like super deep into everything. But again, you can, each level that you play this game, again, you need experience points, just like you do in normal D&D. 400 will get you to second, 1200 will get you to third, 2200 will get you to fourth level. And every time you level up, you gain BP, or building points. And you can spend those building points on your skills. You can spend them on talents. You can spend them on ability scores. You can spend them on weapon specialization. So you can spend your build points however you want, and try to customize your character in the way that you want. Then we have the back of our character, which has our items and equipment, and also our skills. So here are the skills of the game. It's a percentile system. It's percent roll under. So in that way, it's a lot like BRP or Call of Cthulhu. You roll under. If you roll under your skill, then you succeed. If you roll over your skill, you did not succeed. Okay. And so here's some more characters. Here's a dwarf with an 18 con and is a fighter. They have that 38 hit points, and their threshold of pain is 13. So, brutal. And again, so they give us a bunch of examples of characters here. Okay. So we've got our strength, and again, you can kind of see here how these percentile systems work out. And you can see that as your strength increases and you increase that percentile the sort of the decimal point, you do get, slight subtle increases as you go up. Intelligence, again, is used for attacking. Wisdom is used for initiative and defense, not just for clerics. Wisdom, turns out, being aware and perceptive and being able to understand what's going on and having a good common sense, turns out is a very useful tool when one is getting into a combat, because it makes one able to react quicker, and it means that you're able to sense and blows and dodge them easier. Okay? Charisma, looks, yada, yada, yada. We've got our classic races here. Dwarf. Now, this is basic. The advanced game has even more races, but this has our dwarves and our elves and our halflings and our humans. Okay? Basic stuff here. Okay? I'm going to skip honor just for time because it's already 8 o'clock. But needless to say, this is a game that it's not quite honor like in the Bushido sense. It's more like honor in like the self-dignity, pride, being a person of your word sense. And so this game has this idea that like, an adventurer is only as good as their word. And so you track how honorable your character is. And if you're a very honorable character, the game kind of gives you some benefits. And if you're a very dishonorable character, it gives you some potential penalties. Anyways, I'm not going to get, it's a whole system in and to itself. I'm not going to get really, really into it. But you can gain and lose honor. And in a way, it's basically a report card on how well you played the game. So you can see here that basically at the end of a session, the GM is going to rate you on a scale from 1 to 10. How well did you adhere to your alignment? How well did you adhere to your class? And how good was your role playing? And if your character gets a rating of a 10, then you get 4 points. And if your character gets a rating of a 1, you lose 3 points of honor. You'll note here that, for example, this is like, how well did your fighter fight? If the fighter is like, we should push on, and your fighter does something brave and awesome and charges the front rank, well, then that's probably adhering to your class really well. But if your character was a coward and ran away because they were low on hit points, not that. So what is a 10? Absolutely superb, off the charts play for alignment and class. You get 4 points of honor. What about if you had craptastic, seldom plays alignment or class? Well, then you lose 3 points of honor. You'll also see that there's a thing for role playing as well. So again, there is a judginess to this, which some people may not be comfortable with. But the idea is that the game is like, no, look, hey, if you played like crap, I'm going to penalize you. And if you played awesome, I am going to reward you. I'm going to skip quirks and flaws, but basically when you're building your character, you can take flaws, which are problems that your character has, and you can use those points to gain quirks, which are like little unique advantages that your character has, or you could use them to gain more class abilities and powerful class abilities and skills. So it's kind of it's kind of very GURPS esque, again, the game has a tone of like, hey, remember when people play GURPS and they min-max the shit out of their, characters? There was an element of that where they're like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But again, they're trying to be sincere about it. Let's see here. I'm just going to check up. Sorry about chat. Let's see here. Kyle says near fatal wounds don't magically heal up. What the fuck is this heresy? Duran says a little wounds heal fast, but a mega hit takes a while. Yep, that is correct. Chris says, I love this level of minutia tracking. And Alia says, wow, this is really the greatest RPG ever made. I'm really selling on this system. Awesome. From watching my friends run this game for a few levels, says Josh, you find that this system is extraordinarily and realistically simulating fantasy combat. Yes, this game definitely has a strong right? A very strong simulation, right? For sure. And I agree with that. It probably is not the best at doing that sort of heroic fantasy, we're the Avengers type style of play. There's definitely more of there is a little bit of a fantasy Vietnam, kind of attitude there. All right, Mr. Smith is talking about how magical healing works and answering that question. Awesome. Let's see here. So does this actually work? Seriously, I can't tell. It works. I mean, I've played it. I played it at Gen Con, there's a lot of rules, minutia, but I mean, again, this is, on a certain bait level, I don't know that this game is any more or less complicated than Pathfinder 2. I really mean that. So I don't know. Best game I'll never get to play or run. I'm sold, says Ken. All right. So skills. I talked about skills a little bit, and just another little thing that kind of pops up here, because we were just talking about Forbidden Lands and Dragonbane. We were talking about Dragonbane and how Dragonbane does this. Remember, skills are a percentage system, and you need to roll under the percentage. So having a 99 would mean that you would, pass 99% of the time. If your skill was 30, you would pass 30% of the time. When you level up, you gain build points, and you can use those build points to try to increase one of your skills. So how many skills do you gain? Well, if your character is unskilled or novice, which means your skill level is between 0 and 25, then when you spend the build points in that skill, you get to roll a D12 penetrating, which means if you roll a 12, it explodes, and you get to roll the D12 again. That's how many skill points you gain in that skill. So let's say we were a novice. We had a 10% chance to, pick locks or something. We spend the build points and pick locks. We roll a D12, and we add that to our percentage. So we roll a 9. So our 10% chance goes to 19% chance, and so on and so forth. But you'll see that as your character becomes higher and higher skilled, you get less and less and less advancement, because it's harder to, keep learning when you're already advanced or an expert or a master. But you can. It just slows down. So there's kind of a natural incentive to sort of focus on some of your lesser skilled skills. And this is very similar to Dragonbane in that way. You can also see that there is a difficulty system. The GM, kind of like Call of Cthulhu, where Call of Cthulhu can takes like half of your ability or a fifth of your ability. But in this case, you basically apply a penalty to your roll if something's really trivial or easy or average. It's a difficult task has a default modifier of 0. So by default, you are just rolling your percentage. But if the GM says, this is not that hard, this is pretty easy, then it's roll percentage minus 80. So you're very likely to succeed. So again, pretty standard here if we're familiar with Call of Cthulhu. Here are all the skills in the game, okay? And the BP cost is how many build points it costs to increase that skill. So some skills like boating only take 2, or carpentry woodworking only take 2 points in order to increase. But arcane lore takes 10. Disarm trap takes 16. Basically, the good skills cost more points. The crap skills, the flavor skills, the secondary skill trading skills, those are a lot cheaper, right? And then we have a long description of all the skills. And remember, there are more skills in the advanced book. Okay? And then we get into armor, weapons, and equipment. All right? And we'll talk about shields and armor when we get into combat. Okay? But I do want to kind of focus on something here really quick. I do want to focus on armor just for real quick. So you can see the different types of armor that's available, from none all the way down to scale mail. And again, remember, they do not have heavy armor. If you remember from our checklist at the beginning of the game, heavy armor is in the advanced book. So if you want to see what plate mail does and stuff, you got to get the advanced book. The basic book only gives you up to a couple of suits of heavy. The advanced book has more suits of heavy. That's where you get your plate mail and stuff. Anyways, you can see how much damage reduction you get from this armor. It's pretty significant. But you'll also see the defensive adjustment, and this is a penalty. Remember, this means that when your character is wearing scale mail, it is easier to hit you. Okay? Your initiative modifier being positive is a bad thing. It takes you longer to react when you're wearing heavy armor. Okay? So, again, all of these things make a certain amount of sense. That being said, when your character gets hit for 5 or 6 points of damage, you're barely going to feel it because you're just going to say, oh, I take 0, or I take 1, I take 1, I take 1, right? So it does make a significant difference. Okay. And this is the game where your character can be a highly dexterous, intelligent, wise fighter who doesn't wear armor. They're almost like, Sir Bronn from Game of Thrones, right? Where they don't wear heavy armor, he just dodges and gets out of the way. Now, if he gets hit, he's in trouble, but he relies on defense rather than wearing heavy armor. So again, that is the basics of that. So let's get into combat. Let's talk about combat because we got about 50 minutes left, and I do want to talk about combat. So in combat, I'm gonna read this. This is another block of text that I want to read. If you're an avid game player, so that's all of us, right? If you're an avid game player, chances are you're used to choosing an action or actions on your turn, probably from a list of allowable actions or category of actions. This method works great for outdated games with boards and certain inferior, and I hate to even credit them with the term role-playing games that have to hem in their players because they either prefer simple games or plainly lack the genius to play the greatest game known to man. In contrast, much like in real life, your Hackmaster characters can attempt any action he wants at any time. For instance, in real life, to walk across the room, you think about doing so, start moving, and after a certain number of seconds, you have accomplished the task. Likewise, in Hackmaster, if your character wants to take an action, such as crossing the tavern floor, you simply declare his intent, and after a certain amount of time, they complete their action. Thus, Hackmaster has no artificial time segmentation, such as turns, or rounds, or segments, or phases. In Hackmaster, your character's actions are measured by seconds, by time, and time alone. I know this concept can seem difficult after a life of being restrained by unnecessary rules, but I promise that after a session or two, keeping track of actions using actual time like your ancestors intended will become natural to you. So for starters, let's start with initiative. So the way this game works, remember, is that we call it the count up. And this literally represents how many seconds have passed in the fight. So presume we start on 1, right? And usually the GM or something is going to say, okay, 1, 2, 3. So initiative is rolled once at the beginning of a combat, and the initiative roll determines at what second your character gets to basically start acting and start reacting. Up until that point, your character's sort of like they don't really fully understand what's going on yet. Maybe they haven't seen the enemy, or maybe they are caught off guard. They're shocked. They're stunned. And again, dexterity and wisdom will work to high dexterity and high wisdom will work to lower your initiative, whereas a bad dexterity or a bad wisdom will serve to increase it. So in the base game, I should note that you roll a D8 to determine your initial initiative. So obviously rolling high here is bad because you want to start going sooner. But I will note that in the advanced game, this is like a sneak preview. If your character is like sneaking up on somebody or has the drop on them, then they might roll D3 or a D4 instead of a D8. Or if your character is like sleepy or not paying attention or has a bad flaw where they don't, they drift off, they might roll a D12 for their initiative. So again, we're going to roll initiative, and it's our dice roll plus any initiative modifiers from our wisdom and from our dexterity. And some classes, all right, can do the same. Can give you an initiative bonus. Okay, so let's imagine that we've got here Kabor is a 4th level fighter with a 11 wisdom and a 15 dexterity. He has a +2 initiative modifier from wisdom and a -1 modifier from his high dexterity. This gives him a total base initiative modifier of +1. In a standard encounter, Kabor would roll a d12 and add +1 to the result. So if he rolled a 7, he would start acting on initiative 8. All right. So yeah. And that's when your characters can start to go. And also, if your character hasn't gone yet, you are basically kind of flat-footed, right? You're unaware of the attack. It's no good for you. Trust me. Surprise brutal in this game. But it's not like a surprise round like in older versions of D&D. It's just the other people get a couple extra seconds to act before you react, right? That's what surprise basically means. So any character that has a starting initiative number higher than the current count up number is in a state of surprise or otherwise caught unaware and flat-footed. There's even a little sidebar here about using this. Again, anything with this little, this is from the comic. This is Gary Jackson. It's designed to be like helpful, but it's also designed to be like kind of funny. It's a humorous comic. The count up makes using miniatures much easier, as each party member can move his miniature as each second ticks away, giving him something to do and not sitting around waiting for his turn like a Monopoly game. The count up can also be used as a tool to help make games played sans miniatures, without miniatures, more exciting. While the GM describes the action, he can create a sense of suspense as the count up leads to action. So even if you're not playing with miniatures, you might say, for example, a group of orcs leaps from cover and is going to charge down on the party 60 feet away. The GM declares initiative rolls and begins the count up as the players anxiously await their number, whatever they rolled on their initiative. It could sound like this. All right. 1, the orcs leap from their covered position. 2, they're now starting to jog in your direction. 3, with a snarl, they break into a run, covering another 15 feet. 4, 30 feet. 5, the leader shouts a war cry and they break into a charge. They've closed 50 feet and now they're nearly upon you. For a player who is waiting for their turn on 7, each count makes you more and more anxious. All right. So what if you're surprised? What if you don't start acting until second number, the count is 8 or 7 or something? You're not doing anything. Surprise characters continue to do whatever they were doing before the surprise roll, such as walking along, dozing, whistling, daydreaming about that cute girl next door. You could take no other actions, and we mean no other action, not even cowardly acts such as running away or cowering in a corner, let alone more manly pursuits such as defending themselves. Further, surprise negates things like defense adjustments, the ability to roll a shield, and so forth. Ready for the brutality? Surprised characters only roll a D8 for their defense. Remember how we said before that attacking and defense is an opposed roll? You roll D20 for attack plus modifiers. They roll D20 plus modifiers for defense. If you're surprised, you only get to roll a D8 for your defense. Brutal. Essentially, character is confused, hesitating, or otherwise unable to react. But wait a second. If I get hit in the face, clearly I know what's up. Guess what? The game does think about that. Getting hit in the face with a club or shot with a crossbow bolt will typically make any conscious character realize that something is up. If the character is attacked in melee or struck by a ranged weapon, you are only surprised for 2 more seconds. In other words, if we normally would have been surprised till like second 12, if we get hit on second number 4, we can start going at 6. So basically our character is no longer like completely oblivious to a fight happening around them because they got hit in the face. All right. Let me see here what we got here going on here. Thomas says, yeah, all those games that say you could do anything you can imagine, they were lying. Yes, Thomas, they were completely lying. Yes, Mark, we did hint at this during our initiative talk a little bit. Jackal says, fuck it, time to start up a community game. So if two groups are face to face expecting trouble, would you roll a D4 instead? Since it's strange to be surprised for 5+ seconds when expecting the fight. Yeah, Beowulf, I think that's probably reasonable. Also, remember too, there might be a couple of seconds where nobody has gone yet. Like for example, the lowest number that anybody might roll is a 3. And so you basically kind of go 1, 2, okay, 3, and now we're starting the fight. Because it's almost like it took everybody a couple of seconds to realize what was happening, right? So that is true. All right. So what about movement? Well, this is, again, we talked about this on the initiative thing, but characters may move at any time. Like all actions, you declare your intention first, and then when your count up reaches the time indicated on the per second movement rates chart, the character moves, and then you declare what your next action will be. So in other words, you basically say, I'm going to walk over to the ogre, or I'm going to jog over to the ogre, or I'm going to run over to the ogre, or I'm going to run to the portcullis, or I'm going to run to the other side of that pillar. You basically declare what you're going to do. But instead of just like picking up your model and moving it across the battlefield, once you've sort of declared what your character is doing, you just start moving them basically in 5 and 10 foot increments on every count. So if a character says, I'm going to try to rush the ogre, and the ogre's, 50 feet away, you will go, okay, I'm going to move 10 feet, because note, by the way, you cannot start at a run or a sprint. You have to start at a jog or a walk, and then you can increase it the next second to running or sprinting. Anyways, and I should note, by the way, if you're running and sprinting, it's also very difficult to, guess what? Defend yourself. That's right. But it's harder. Get this. It's harder to hit you with a ranged weapon if your character is running or sprinting. But if you're walking or standing still, it's a lot easier to hit you with a ranged weapon. So in any case, what would end up happening as if we were playing on a VTT or we were playing around a table, after you sort of declare, everybody kind of declares what they're doing. And again, you're not locked into that. I could get halfway across the battlefield, realize the ogre is going to do something else, and just decide I'm going to change what I'm doing. I was jogging over to the ogre. I'm now going to start jogging over to the wizard or to the rogue or to the cleric. But instead of waiting for my turn, the GM says, okay, 7. And I go, bloop, and I move myself 10 feet. And then everybody else does their little thing, whatever they're doing. And then the GM goes, okay, 8. And then I go, bloop, and I move myself 10 feet. So again, it's just instantaneous, basically. You're kind of all taking your turns kind of simultaneously. And it probably sounds very chaotic. And I've played it at Gen Con, and it can be, but also in a weird way, not. I think it's harder for the GM because you have a lot more monsters to run. But for a player, it's actually not that bad. Okay, so that's how you move. All right, what about ranged attacks? All right, well, ranged attacks work as follows. You make your attack roll, you modify it with your intelligence and your dexterity, and you're trying to shoot the person. Now, here's the deal with ranged combat. A character's defense score, okay, represents their ability to sort of, parry and dodge and do all this other stuff, okay? But in the basic Hackmaster game, getting hit by an arrow, it doesn't really matter how good of a sword fighter you are or how skilled you are at parrying and deflecting blows in melee. If somebody shoots you with an arrow, it's going to hit you or it's not going to hit you. It doesn't really matter. Again, this isn't like some superhero game where your character's like, I can use my dagger and parry away the arrow or the sling bullet. Like, no, it doesn't really work that way. Shields might, but not typically a ranged attack. So if you're shot, if you're moving, you roll a D20 for your defense, but you don't add any other modifiers. But if you're not moving, you only roll a D12 for your defense. So yes, if you're not moving in the battlefield, you're a sitting duck for people shooting at you. So I think we can all agree that makes sense. And then the accuracy of your attack goes down with range. So we can see that if we had a long bow, if we're within 5 feet to 60 feet, we just roll a D20. But if we're at up to 120 feet, we have a D20 -4. Up to 160 feet, D20 minus 6. And up to 200 feet, D20 minus 8. All right. So as the ranges get longer, the accuracy goes down. Nothing unusual here. What about how often you can shoot? Well, the good news is we've got an entire table here that tells you how long it is. Now, if you have your bow up and ready, it only takes a single second to shoot a bow. But to ready it, draw out the arrow, get it, take aim, and then shoot all takes a number of seconds. And that ends up creating what's called the rate of fire. Now, what's interesting here is basically if you're going into a fight and you've got your bow aimed, you've got your arrow knocked, you've got your crossbow locked and loaded, that first shot that you get off can actually occur almost instantaneous. But after you do that shot, you now have to go through that whole process again. And you can see how many, and remember, this is a game of seconds. A heavy there is no cinematic tactical combat action here, okay? A heavy crossbow takes 60 seconds to reload because it takes a full minute. A light crossbow takes 20 seconds. But even a bow takes 12 seconds. I mean, think about a medieval archer getting off 5 accurate shots a minute. That's pretty good. Let alone one that's in sort of more of a fantasy, you're not like in a formation with volley fire. But in terms of like, bring up your bow, pulling out the arrow, knocking it, pulling it back, taking aim, getting your shot, shooting. Yep, every 12 seconds. So range attacks, not the fastest things in the world here. Okay? So something to consider about range attacks. I'm going to skip the target size here. All right. What about melee attacks? Well, we talked about this a little bit on the initiative as well. The way that this game works is you don't really have an attack action. Okay? If your character has a melee weapon or claws or a bite or a big pole arm or a sword or whatever, and you're moving around the battlefield and you get within range of another character who has a melee weapon, the game says you guys are fighting. And so what ends up happening is as soon as two characters who have a melee weapon readied get next to each other, whoever has the longer reach of a weapon gets to make an attack immediately. And to do this, you make an attack roll, which is D20 plus your attack bonus, and your defender makes a defense roll, which is D20 minus 4 plus your defense bonus. The numbers are compared, and the higher total wins. Ties go to the defender. Okay? And on the very next second, the person who has the shorter reach, they get to attack. At that point, each weapon has a speed factor, and that tells us how many seconds have to pass before we can attack that same person again. The game basically kind of treats it when people get into a melee as it being sort of like, it's almost like its own little mini fight. Because if I walked up to, let's say, a goblin, and I have the longer reach, and I close with the goblin, I'm in melee with him, I make my attack, I hit him, I kill him, he explodes. If in the next couple of seconds I move and engage another goblin, guess what? I immediately attack again. So, it's almost like each time that you engage in sort of a grouping or melee, it's almost like it's its own little mini combat system. Walter, why is there a P after the D20? P means that it is penetrating. And that means that when you roll the maximum number on that die, you get to roll an additional die. Now, with the lower dice, D6, D8, you just roll a D6 or D8. But with the D20, you roll a D6 additional. So if you roll a 20 on the D6, you don't roll another D20. You roll another D6 and add that to your total result. So, and by the way, damage rolls are also, I think, all penetrating. So, you might roll like 2d4 damage, but if you roll only 4s, you get to roll those dice again. And if you roll 4s again, so on and so forth. All right. So, we make our defense roll. They make their attack roll. Okay. But what about armor? What about shields? Okay, great. When defending against a typical attack, an unshielded character, a defender, an unshielded defender, rolls D20 penetrating, -4, and adds their defense bonus. And that defense bonus is going to come from our high wisdom, or it could be a penalty from a low wisdom, our dexterity, and if we have any other additional defensive modifiers, maybe from a talent or a quirk or a class ability. All right. And defense, remember, is literally our ability to sort of, fight well and not get hit. So the default roll is at -4. There's a penalty to defending. Basically, the attacker kind of has the edge. And it compares this D20, this is the defender roll, D20 -4, plus any bonuses, against the attacker's roll, which is D20 penetrating, plus the attacker's attack bonus. And remember, the attack bonus comes from class, any sort of class bonuses, but it also comes from your intelligence modifier, and it comes from your dexterity modifier. However, if your character is using a shield, you get rid of the -4 penalty, and it improves the defender's roll to D20 penetrating plus a defense bonus, as noted above, and including a bonus from the shield itself. Guess what? Turns out shields are really, really, really good at, blocking attacks and avoiding getting hit. So much so that not having a shield puts you at an immediate disadvantage, and having a shield puts you at a significant advantage. But of course, it limits what weapons you can use, and there's other issues, right? Also, shields can break, as we'll get into in a second. On a failed defense roll, when using a shield, the attacker has successfully bypassed the shields and rolls the appropriate damage directly against the defender. Any damage in excess of the armor's damage reduction is taken as a loss of hit points, i.e. a wound. So basically, if you have a shield and you roll your defense and the attacker rolls higher than you, they've managed to get around your shield. They've landed a hit on your character, a real physical hit. They're going to roll damage. Your armor is going to absorb some of that damage, and whatever's left over, you're going to take as a wound, as a hit point damage. So, for example, let's postulate that Brynhildr, the fighter, who wears leather armor and carries a small shield, has just been attacked by an orc. If her total defense, D20P plus roll plus defense bonus, is less than her opponent's total attack, she has failed to successfully defend herself, and the GM will roll the orc's damage dice. From this total, he subtracts 2 points of damage to account for the damage reduction of Brynhildr's armor, and then she takes the rest as a wound. But if a defender with a shield succeeds in his defense roll, regardless of the numbers rolled, the attacker rolls half damage and the defender applies it to their shield. Okay? So what does this mean? It basically means that when you have a shield, the idea is you're kind of trying to get hit, right? You're trying to get hit in your shield. So when you're rolling without a shield and you're rolling your defense, the idea is that your character is literally trying to, duck and weave and dodge these attacks. And so if they miss, they just missed you. But if you have a shield and again, you get to add a bonus to your defense roll because it represents you deflecting or blocking the attack with your shield. Well, something did get hit. It just wasn't you. It was the shield. And so what ends up happening is they deal half of their damage and it goes to the shield. All right. But piercing weapons are really bad at this, but like slashing weapons, bludgeoning weapons, crushing weapons are really good at this. All right. If they break through, if they do enough damage, even on half, to break your shield explodes, it's gone, and whatever's left, you also get hit with. So basically, there is a world where if a really high damage attack hits you and you've raised your shield, they claw, big dragon claw. It crushes through your shield, breaks it, shatters it, and the claws still rake across your chest. You'll get your armor damage reduction. But that's a very cinematic moment, right? I think we can all agree with that. Tedious. Tedious is all hell, Dan, but very fun. Very, 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 very interesting. Michael, this could be a very neat CRPG system. Again, Michael, that is an interesting point. We live in the world of VTT automation, we live in the world of very complex CRPGs. So yeah, maybe there is something to be said about this because there is a lot of dice rolling for this. Now, that being said, I don't know if you've played high level D&D or high level Pathfinder. There's a lot of dice rolls for that too. Roll your mischance. They have to make a save. Roll my damage. Oh, it's fire, but it was 4 points of fire damage, but they have 10 fire weakness. So add 14 damage, but I did 10 cold damage, but they have resistance to cold 15. So take off the 10 points of damage. And then I also did, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you are signing up for the crunch. This is a game that is very high in the simulation. It wants the mechanics to make it really feel like when you go, oh yeah, that is how a shield would work. That is how armor would work. All right. So let's take another example here. If Brynhildr, our fighter, is attacked again by the orc, and this time her total, remember, she has a shield. She has a small shield. And this time she has a defense score which beats the orc's score. Then she hasn't been hit. Her shield has been hit. And so the GM rolls half of the orc's normal damage. So 2d8 plus 2 becomes 1d8 plus 2. If the GM rolls a total damage of 6 points, Brynhildr's small shield reduces this damage by 4 points. Her small shield only has 4 hit points. And her leather armor reduces it by another 2 points, but she loses she loses no hit points. So basically what happened is the orc literally breaks through Brynhildr's shield, which absorbs most of the blow. She still takes 2 points of damage, but her leather armor takes 2 points of that off. So she's left with nothing. She did not get wounded, but her shield is splintered and the orc is still right in her face. So you could see that having a larger shield or a small shield gives you a very significant bonus to your defense. It makes it really easy to block attacks when you have a shield in this game, like really easy. But remember, your shield can only take so much punishment. Okay. You'll also see that there's a cover value. That is basically how it works for ranged attacks. If you know that a missile attack is coming up and you have a shield, you can basically raise your shield and gain a portion of cover. So we'll go into here. Shields provide cover against projectiles. The defender, that's you, simply rolls a d20, and if he equals or exceeds the shield's cover value, your shield catches and deflects the projectile. Note the cover value improves if your character actively hides behind his shield, but a character must state that they are actively hiding behind their cover before the shot is announced. So for example, if we have a large shield, 50% of ranged attacks shot at us are just going to hit our shield. And if we know that a ranged volley is about to come in, if we see a group of orcs readying their bow, because remember, it's not automatic. It takes a number of seconds for them to pull out their bow and pull out an arrow and cock it and load it. If we see that it's coming and we raise our shield and hide behind it, 75% of the arrows that would hit us just automatically get deflected by our shield. Because, shields are good. And that's what they do. So again, it's like one of those oh yeah, duh, this makes total sense. And again, shields, while resilient, may be splintered and destroyed by a heavy blow. The likelihood of this occurring is directly a function of the damage dealt by the blow. So again, if a character does enough damage, it can destroy your shield. Now, granted, it's not like it's nothing. They do have to do a lot of damage to sort of break through and destroy it completely. But if your shield is tanking an ogre's mallet or a dragon's claws, then it's no bueno. Trevco, is there a scenario where an attacker could still totally miss a shielded enemy? There might be in the advanced rules, Trevco, but I'm not as familiar with them. I've actually played more of this basic version than I have the actual advanced, because this basic version came out I think it came out 2 years before they released the advanced version. And that's like when at the time at Gen Con, when I was like actually like going and playing it at their booth, and like I joined a couple ticketed events just to run through some like, you know, Hackmaster dungeons, but they were using the basic rules. So I am much more familiar with the basic rules. And according to Mr. Aaron Smith here, yes, in normal Hackmaster, there is a chance that you would totally miss. Yes, if you miss, right, they actually kind of have the degrees of success. If you miss by more than 10, it's usually a complete miss. You just completely miss. Okay. So our shields can get splintered. They can block for us. They can absorb damage. Look at that art. It's brutal. What about if we take a bunch of damage? Guess what? It can knock you back. That's right. If you get hit for a lot of damage, it can make your character knock back, and it pushes you back 5 feet. Note that the amount of damage that you need to take to be knocked back is dependent on your size. That's right. The bigger you are, it takes more to push you around. So again, if you do enough damage, you can start literally pushing your opponents back. Think about like old school fantasy warfare. Like you can literally drive your enemies back, right? And push them, push the line, right? And, maybe push through and open up gaps or break through the enemy's line and get to the other side of it. So it's kind of a more, tactical simulation, crunchy, type of thing. So, hey, we got a super chat coming in from Chris with this very first super chat. It says, all right, I'm sold. All right, Chris, Now again, I think they still support this game. I still see it at Gen Con. I don't know if they're still like making stuff for it, but the Hackmaster people are still around. But thank you for your very first super chat, Chris. It's very generous of you, and I appreciate it greatly. Hopefully it'll catch up here soon in a second. But thank you for your first one. That's awesome. Does this take into account the gravity on this plane? Probably. It's probably in the game. It's probably in the advanced Game Master's Guide, Bob. William Brandon says, oh, there's that super chat. Thank you again, Chris. That's awesome. William Brandon says, in the GMG, they have expanded knockback rules where you can slam into other people behind you and just cause total chaos. There you go. MCDM loved the idea of pushing people around and knocking people back, and it had all sorts of rules for pushing people into wooden fences and stone walls. And, Hackmaster was doing it in 2011. Yeah, you could totally do a phalanx formation. Exactly, point blank. So let's say, for example, that a fighter deals a single blow of 10 points of damage against a goblin. Even if the shield and armor reduce this damage below 10, the fighter still knocks back the creature 5 feet. So basically, just because your armor absorbed it doesn't mean that the blow still wasn't huge. So the base damage is what determines the knockback. Note, if the damage roll exceeds the damage required for a knockback by double or triple or more, this also increases the knockback. So if you get a double or triple knockback, you knock them back and they're knocked prone, and their next attack's initiative is reset to their appropriate weapon speed value. Assuming, of course, that this didn't just kill them outright. In other words, basically, it disrupts them. They have to restart their initiative to attack you again. You basically have just completely laid them out with just an absolute massive hammer smash of a blow. Pretty sweet. All right. Amaya says, seems like knockback could be a double-edged sword since it allows the defender to flee. Amaya, great point. Damage rolls of 5 points per size category automatically knock back the defender 5 feet. The attacker can, on the very next second, choose to step forward and advance those 5 feet. If you do that, the combat engagement stays locked in. But if you don't want to do that, it's a way for you to break that engagement, and then you could go off and rush and engage a different enemy and start fighting them. So basically, you push them back, and you can step forward and keep engaged with them, or you could knock them away and use that opportunity to break free from the combat. It basically gives the attacker the choice of whether they want to keep pursuing this combat, or if they want to, the person's been knocked down, they've been knocked prone, they're going to be out for a few seconds. This is an opportunity for me to rush over to the rogue or to the wizard and help them out. What about trauma? Because we hinted at this, right? Sure, you take a bunch of damage, your character might be knocked down. But what if you take a lot of damage? Okay. A character that suffers massive damage in one blow might drop incapacitated by the agony. To know how much injury you can take before the pain becomes too much to bear, you must determine your threshold of pain. This is equal to 30% of your hit points plus another 1% of your hit points per character level, but 2% for fighters. Is this fiddly and stupid? Yes, but again, there are moments where they go, let's make it funny. It's funny because it's so complicated. I mean, you're making this calculation once every level. It's not the end of the world, but it is funny. Anyways, long story short, that amount of hit points, roughly 30%, 35% of your character's hit points. If you take more than that in a single blow, you have to make a threshold of pain check, which is called a top check. And it's a D20 roll versus half your constitution. So if your constitution is 18, your threshold of pain check is a 9 or less. If your constitution is 10, your threshold of pain check is a 5 or less. It's just like a flat check. This means that if you get struck with a really nasty blow that is a significant percentage of your character's hit points, there's a very good chance, unless you have a really high constitution, that your character will be dropped in agonizing pain. They're not dead. They're just stunned. They're knocked senseless. They've had the wind knocked out of them. They're seeing stars. They're dazed. They're maybe in a little bit of shock. The recovery time while you're laying there senseless, by the way, you fall to the ground unable to take actions. How long? For 5 seconds plus the difference between your check and whatever you needed to roll. Okay. So potentially times the difference, between the half constitution check and the half constitution. This could be like 30 seconds. This could be like 40 seconds. I'm not kidding when I say that, this is their version of going unconscious. It's their version of base, but instead of being like you're dead, because again, you die at 0, but they give you more hit points. So they don't want you to go to 0. But if you get hit with a massive blow in a fight, chances are pretty good that you're probably going to spend most of the rest of the fight out. Again, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It all depends. So let's take an example here. Karak is our 3rd level dwarf fighter who has a constitution score of 16 and they have 29 hit points. The Karak's base threshold of pain is calculated as 30% base plus 6% because he's a level 3 fighter, which gives 2% for 36%. So 36% of 29 is 10.44. We round up. Whenever he loses 11 or more hit points in a single blow, the player must roll a D20 in hopes of getting a result equal to or less than 8, which is half of Karak's constitution score of 16. Let's say I re-roll a 12. Well, remember, we needed to roll 8 or lower. Yikes, 12. Well, guess what? Karak rolls to the ground and writhes in pain for 20 seconds. You see, the difference between 12 and 8 is 4. 4 times 5 is 20, and that's 20 seconds. So, that could be a lot of time. It could be not a lot of time. Guess what? If your character is surrounded by a bunch of bad guys and gets dropped to the ground and is writhing in pain, you're probably going to get really killed. All right. In fact, you know what might happen to you while your character is laying there prone on the ground, squirming and staggering? You might get coup de grace. A character can automatically slay an incapacitated, unconscious, or otherwise helpless foe, including those who have fallen from a failed threshold of pain check, if you spend 10 seconds carefully dispatching the foe. So basically, to do this, a character cannot be engaged by another opponent. They must be physically on top of or kneeling or otherwise up and close and personal with the victim. and the next 10 seconds represents the time it takes to get into position, assuming the character's already next to the foe. Removing headgear, steadying their grip, smirking, taunting, teabagging, or whatever else is required to finish the helpless foe. So basically, this is like, pulling out your knife and slitting their throat, or taking your sword and placing it onto their, armor and taking your hand and just, just driving it through the steel. It is a coup de grace. It's not just a quick attack. It's not just an immediate little flick. So it takes 10 seconds. And you can't be engaged because if you're fighting for your life, you don't have time to do this. But it does mean that if you leave one of your allies writhing in pain for 10 seconds with an enemy, they could take their, sword and jab it through their throat. I don't exactly remember what it is, but I do know this. I think, and Smith can probably correct me here, I think rogues.
Karen the Blade a cinch. Tip $10. You coped a graced, my friend.
Kyron the Blade Singer, a very famous PC not of mine, but I was the GM for a campaign when we were very young. We were younger lads, and Kyron the Blade Singer watched in horror as a knight of Tachesis slew his friend. But pronunciation in French were not in our vocabulary as much back then. And so Kyron shouted out in disbelief, "You coup de graced, my friend." Because that's what we thought it was pronounced as. Coup de graced. We also called it melee, not melee. But this was very young Derek and group. I believe in the rules that rogues, thieves, I think they can coup de grace in 3 seconds. So proficient are they with slitting throats and ending people. So pretty good. Anyways. So that is coup de grace. You can always choose to attack a helpless foe instead of spending the time to actually try to line up a death blow. Remember, the coup de grace, automatically kills them. Success, no damage roll. You just need 10 seconds to line it up. You can just keep attacking them and ripping into them. And it notes, by the way, animals and other non-sapient creatures always attack since they lack the intelligence to perform a coup de grace. So like a wolf or a bear or a zombie, they're still going to keep attacking you and ripping your unconscious body to shreds, but they're not going to like coup de grace you the way that like an intelligent foe might. And by the way, but if you're in that situation, you basically roll nothing for your defense and the attacker gets to attack you at like double speed because you're not offering any defense. And so there's nothing to worry about. So they can just go, cha, 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 or basically you fall to the ground writhing in pain. And then the wolf just grabs you by the neck and just starts shaking and ripping you apart. It's not specifically coup de grace you, but it is, tearing your shit up. What about automatic hits and defenses? What if you roll a nat 20 on your attack roll? Guess what? If you roll a nat 20 on your attack roll, even if the defender's total is higher, you hit. However, if the defender rolls a nat 20 on their defense, then you automatically succeed. And if both of you roll a nat 20, then you calculate the total. However, if an attacker rolls a nat 20 and you've beaten their defense, it becomes a critical hit. You deal an extra die of damage. Okay, remember, most things do 2 weapon die of damage, so this does 3 weapon dice of damage. And the Hackmaster's Game Master Guide, the advanced game, has a much more complex system of critical hits, detailing all sorts of interesting, gory effects with critical hits. So in the basic game, a critical hit just does extra damage. But in the advanced game, friends, in the advanced game, we've got ourselves some critical hit tables. And they will mess you up. Here we go. 42 ancillary critical hit tables. For example, here we go. By the way, if you're curious, this is the critical hit flow chart. So if you do score a critical hit, you will then flip to page 42 and begin following the critical hit flow chart. All right. Let's say, for example, that the attacker is large, maybe an ogre. In that case, you are going to roll on the size defender attacker size severity chart. Okay. This is a D10,000 roll or lower, modified by the variance between your size, the attacker, and the defender's size. So, for example, if a character is really big and critically hits something that is really small, you are going to roll a much higher number. So, for example, if let's say a huge ogre or giant critically hits our medium-sized character, well, normally you would roll a D10,000, but because they're huge and we're medium, they roll a D8,000 plus 2,000, which means the lowest that they can get on the critical hit table is a 2001. Basically, the higher the number, the worse it is. All right. Well, what happens? Well, we have to know what type of weapon it is. And then we look at all these charts for what happens on the critical hit, depending on what you rolled. So let's say that we rolled let's say after the modifier, it was a crushing weapon. Let's say that we rolled a 7,500. All right. Well, then we would roll a D100 to determine the location. And, then we have to compare the severity component. All right. So then we would say that we were hit in the shoulder and the side. And what would happen is you would deal 2 extra points of damage. Your attacker's, the defender's initiative is reset. They drop all the items in their hands. They get a -3 attack penalty. They get a -1 speed penalty and a -3 defense penalty and a -4 strength, all until healed. And they suffer a permanent -1 to their strength score. Yes, a permanent -1 to their strength score because you just destroyed their shoulder. Normal stuff. Needless to say, a little complicated, but hey, it's sincere. It means well. It's just not very serious about it. All right. But that's what happens when an attacker rolls a nat 20. Well, what about the defender? Well, if a defender rolls a natural 19, so if they roll a 19 on the die and their total is higher than their attackers, then you execute a near perfect defense. You get to make an immediate hand-to-hand counterattack. This is the thing that I like the most about this entire game. I'm not even kidding. In every movie I grew up watching, okay, every sword and sorcery flick, Willow, Conan, Sword and the Sorcerer, I'm blanking here, but Dragon Slayer, Lady Hawk, in every fantasy show that I ever watched, I would always see this maneuver happen. The attacker comes in and swings their sword. The defender, our hero, raises their sword and blocks it, right? Aragorn does this all the time in Lord of the Rings. Attacker, sword coming in. Defender parries the blow with their sword. Clink, it defends. And then they're standing there. And then what does our hero do? The person who just parried? They take their fist and they punch them in the face. Or they hit them, right? Or they elbow them. Or they, get in close and kick them, knee them, do something, right? Like they take the advantage of their parry and turn it into a quick jab or a quick hit. I've seen this is like in every sword fighting scene in every movie ever. Again, it happens like 3 times throughout the Lord of the Rings film. So if you roll a 19 on your defense, then you get to make a free counterattack, but it has to be basically a hand-to-hand. It has to be a knee, a punch, an elbow, a kick, unless you have like a dagger or a knife, So then if you have a little light weapon, you can quickly cut them and do something like that. By the way, this attack is independent of what your normal attack would be, and it does not do a lot of damage, right? It's only D4s damage. So it's not a ton of damage. It's more flavor than anything. But again, remember, a little bit of damage can go a long way in this game, and it's totally for free. But I love this. I love this rule. On the other hand, if you roll a nat 20 on your defense roll, then you have executed a perfect defense and you immediately receive a free riposte / counterattack with your weapon. And this ignores your normal speed set of weapons. All right. So, for example, you basically get to make a free attack. If you roll a nat 20 on your defense, you get to make a free attack against them. So it's pretty good. And yes, and as Aaron noted here, when you physically punch somebody in the face, it ignores shield and armor, but not like natural defenses like scales or hide. Because basically, you're punching them in the face. You know, their armor doesn't matter, their shield doesn't matter. You know, they've closed in. You're just hitting them. You know, you're actually hitting them where they count. So it is nice that it bypasses armor, which is pretty good. So, anyways, really awesome. So there's this really fun. I mean, attack rolls can be very dramatic in this game. The game also has fumbles. And again, the advanced guide has a much more complex system. But if you roll a nat 1 on your attack roll, you could potentially fumble. And if the defender rolls a nat 1, then they potentially fumble. And again, the Hackmaster's Game Master Guide in the advanced system has a much more elaborate fumble system. So we're not going to, go too deep into that. So yeah, so let's take a look. This is what we're going to end with because it's 9 o'clock. We're going to take a look at a detailed example of combat from the book. So let's take what we've learned and see how an actual combat encounter plays out. For this example, we're going to have a little fun and see how the Knights of the Dinner Table handle the new rules. BA is our game master, and he's read the rules for Hackmaster Basic and has all of his players roll up new characters. After being caught cheating at darts back at the inn and getting into a drunken brawl, the group has fled into a nearby forest, hoping to shake their pursuers. Unfortunately, they have become hopelessly lost in the overgrowth. As the sun begins to set and darkness is threatening to engulf them, BA, our game master, is about to throw a little hurt their way. So here are our 4 characters. We have El Ravager the Fifth, played by Dave. Now, he is a neutral human fighter. He has level 1. He has 30 hit points. His initiative bonus is +1, which, remember, is bad. It means he goes a little bit slower because he's going to roll his initiative die and add 1. His speed, that's with his weapon, is 11. That probably means his weapon is a big, heavy thing because it means that after he attacks and he's in combat, he can't attack again in that melee, in that fracas, for another 11 seconds. His reach is 3 feet, which is pretty good. His attack is +4. His damage is 4d4 penetrating +3. He has a +7 to his defense roll because he's using a medium shield. Wooga. Big shield. His threshold of pain is 9, and he has to roll a 7 or under to avoid being taken out. We also have Knuckles the Ninth, played by Bob, who is a chaotic neutral dwarf thief. We can see that Knuckles' weapon is much faster. Knuckles can attack every 7 seconds with his dagger. There's also an option he can do called Jab, which makes it even faster. Unfortunately, his damage is not as high, and his damage reduction is, or his defense is a little bit lower. We also have Justina the Seventh, a cleric, and we have Noir Lotus, who is a dwarf mage, okay? And of course, if you're familiar with the comic book, this will be a lot of fun for you. Okay, so, all right. This is, of course, the GM speaking. After pushing your way through the dense thicket, you suddenly come to the edge of a meandering trail. A trail? Hooty-hoo! We're saved! Well, it's not much of a trail. Just a footpath, really. But it seems to have had plenty of use. There are tracks running in both directions. Tracks? What sort of tracks, BA? Who cares? It's got to lead somewhere. Let's follow it. They're small tracks, mostly impressions of heelless boots with hobnail soles. Small? You mean like kid-sized? Or like small humanoids of some type? Uh-oh. We're not in Kansas anymore, guys. Well, I'm not liking the smell of this. What do you guys think? I say we pick a direction and follow it. Beats getting lost in the woods. I agree. Like Brian said, it's got to lead somewhere. Let's do it. But weapons at the ready just in case. Several turns later. You follow the trail for a few miles, and the going is frustrating. The trail leads under low-hanging limbs and threads between huge trees growing closer together, requiring you to squeeze through. At long last, you break out of the forest and enter a small clearing, perhaps 30 to 35 feet across. The footpath forks here, splitting off in 2 different directions. What do you do? What do you want to do? This isn't a trail. This is a freaking obstacle course. Great. Now what? This doesn't seem to be leading anywhere. Well, why don't you check for traps again, Bob? Maybe we can go in the direction with the signs of the most traffic. That's a good idea. Don't bother making a check, Bob. As soon as you enter the clearing, there are a series of war cries from the other side. The undergrowth explodes with activity. 4 goblins rush out of the shadows and charge the group. Goblins? It's an ambush! All right, everybody go ahead and roll a D12 for initiative. Oh yeah, bring it. My blade is thirsty for goblin blood. I'm still feeling a little uneasy about going with a battle axe. I wish I had a sword right about now. Watch those flanks, guys. There might be more of them. All right, so we got our goblins, right? They're coming in here on the upper right-hand side. They've got 20 hit points. Their initiative is 3. Their speed with their weapon, remember, is 8, because there's no real concept of speed here, right? Because we just move 5 feet at a time. Their reach is short range. They have a +3 attack. Don't do a lot of damage. Not a lot of DR. And they can move 5 feet a second. Crap! I roll a frickin' 8. I'm hosed. Hoyrit coming in. Beating the tip goal.
Hoyrit tipped $35. Hackmaster advanced.
And with that, the tip goal is reached. We are going to be doing a Hackmaster Advanced follow-up, and we're going to be talking more about this insane game. Thank you, Hoyrit, for your incredible support. That is awesome. I'm glad you wanted to see it. I believe Hoyrit is the one who added this game to the poll, by the way, for the Patreon. So I'll see you Tuesday. We have to see. There might be some work involved with trying to get this to be the advanced game. All right. So where were we? We are rolling initiative. There were goblins busting through the underbrush up here in the upper right-hand corner. So everybody rolled a D12, and they're adding their modifiers. All right. So Bob, or Knuckles the Thief, says, crap, I rolled a frickin' 8. I'm hosed. My nit's 6, BA. I don't go till 10. I got a 3. I'm pretty spry on my feet. Okay, I'm calling the count. The goblins rushed out from their hiding place on 1. On 2, they're approximately 30 feet away with the fire of bloodlust in their eyes. They charge. Note, in the comic, we're going to see what the action count is up here in the upper right. So this is on turn 1, right? They've bust out from, or second 1, sorry. They've bust out from the bushes. And they're moving at 5 feet per second. That's their jogging rate, okay? They're moving 4 abreast in a race to see who can cut you down first. On 3, the goblins move 5 feet closer and begin breaking into a sprint. Now remember, Brian got a 3 for his initiative. And you can see, by the way, their modifiers. Brian actually rolled a 1, but his dexterity and wisdom aren't great. And so he actually had to add 2 to that and get a 3. Whereas the other people rolled what they got and they added their modifiers as well. So the other characters are still waiting. It's almost like their PCs don't really know what's happening yet, but his character does. He goes, BA, on 3, I move into the trees, out of sight. And then Bob goes, what the hell, big guy? I got to retrieve my spell components. My bootlace, it became untied. The fight's in the other direction. Oh, I'm still down 5 hit points from that bar fight. I've got to conserve. So, on 3, the mage falls back into the woods. And now we're up to 4. So the GM spells out 4. The goblins move 10 more feet nearer as they call out insults about your mother. 5. The goblins are only 5 feet away from El Ravager, whom they now seem to have set their sights on. Okay? So again, each second, he's moving these miniatures, 5 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet. 6. All right, so in 6, 2 of the goblins are in melee range of El Ravager. So on initiative or second 6, okay, the GM moved 2 of the goblins into melee range with Dave, El Ravager, right down here, right? So these 2 goblins, Goblin 1 and Goblin 4, have now entered into melee range with the fighter, Dave. All right, they're going to engage him in melee. The one on the far left seems to be moving for Knuckles. Dave, your initiative is 6, so you're no longer surprised. So remember, Dave's initiative was 6, so he gets to go on this turn as well. And since he's not surprised, he gets to attack. But remember, when 2 people come together, whoever has the longer reach gets to hit first. Goblins, when using defined weapons, have a reach modifier of -1 foot. They're small. They're little tiny creatures. With their short swords, which normally have a reach of 2 feet, this has been reduced to 1 foot. El Ravager, on the other hand, has a 3-foot reach with his battle axe. So, he snaps to as the goblins close in, and he gets to make that first attack. Kick some ass, dude. 2-on-1, eh? I like those odds. Just be sure to leave one for me. Yeah. Me too. Okay, I'm swinging at the gobbo on my left, BA. Sweet. I rolled a 17. That gives me a modified to hit of 21. So Dave rolls a D20, gets a 17, and he adds his attack bonus, which is 4, and gets a total of 21. Thus, the goblin is going to roll his defense and needs to get a 21 or higher in order to defend against this attack. The goblin rolls an 18 for defense. Looks like you hit. Go ahead and roll for damage. Ha ha! 9 points. Take that, you sneaky green scene son of a bitch. Attaboy, Dave. Attaboy. So the GM rolled a D20, got a 12, added 6, total of 18. That was less than the attack. So, boom, the damage goes through. Dave, using a battle axe, is rolling 4d4 P plus 3 damage for a total of 9. Apparently, he did not roll any 4s. The creature's armor absorbs 2. The goblin's wearing like leather armor. So the creature takes 7 points of damage, which is not quite enough for the creature to take a trauma check. But I think if we look back at our goblins, going all the way back up here, yeah, their threshold of pain is 8. If he had done 1 more point of damage, and honestly, he probably normally should have, because he probably should have rolled at least 1 4 and penetrated, that goblin would basically have a really good chance of basically being out of the fight. Now, yeah, sure, they have 20 hit points, but if they take 8 points of damage in an attack, okay, they drop to the ground. There's a really good chance they're going to drop to the ground and writhe uncontrollably in pain for 15, 20, 25, 35 seconds. They're basically taken out of the fight. All right, so let's go back to the fight. Oh, hey, we had a super chat from Janka. Catching up on the stream, this system seems as epic and immersive as it is tedious and facetious. And Janka, I think you are completely in agreement with this. There is absolutely a fun to playing this game specifically because it is so kind of ridiculous. Absolutely. Like there's no way around that. If you're playing this game, it's because you want to bathe in the absolute absurdity of this, you know? So Kevin says, just getting here, is this the one that was required to be comedic or is this the serious edition? Kevin, this is the serious edition. This is Hackmaster 5th edition. We did discuss at the beginning of the stream, Hackmaster 4th edition, which was the deliberate parody. Now, as they said, with the 5th edition, they did remove the deliberately over the top stupid stuff, but there is still an element in this game of sort of being a little bit tongue in cheek and a little bit kind of silly, but it's not like comedic. All right. So Dave did 8 damage. All right. But remember that he got to attack first because he had the longer reach. Dave, while you're fighting the goblin on the left, the one on your right attacks you. So now the goblins get to attack. Since this is the combatant's first exchange of blows, the goblin will return El Ravager's attack when the count up moves to the next second. So remember, they hit each other. The person with the higher reach attacks first, and then in the next second, the other character can start attacking. So when we go from count 6 to count 7, they get to attack. While El Ravager can ready his battle axe and attack the goblin again when the count up reaches 17. Okay, so remember, the battle axe is awesome, but it's slow. It takes 11 seconds. That represents him swinging, then fighting back and forth, getting his axe back, finding time, and then landing another blow. So when Dave's El Ravager attacked, the second or the count was at 6. So, and this is just a number that you have to track. I don't know, you could write it down on a piece of paper or something like that. But you know your weapon speed is 11, so you're going to add that to the current count, which is 6. And that means that we can attack again with our battle axe at 17 in this combat, in this melee. As long as we're still fighting these goblins, I can only attack every 11 seconds. Okay? All right. Goblin number 4 has an attack. What's your defense? Dave gets a 16. He fumbles. You get to make an immediate free counterattack. So, in the basic rules, if you roll a nat 1 on your attack roll, the defender gets to make an immediate free counterattack. So, Dave rolled the GM rolls a nat 1 on his attack roll, and so Dave gets to make an immediate free counterattack. Note, even though Dave just attacked with his battle axe and has to wait 11 seconds before he can attack with it properly again, this free counterattack is literally a free counterattack. He gets to attack immediately again. It doesn't impact or affect or reset his speed initiative in any way. All right. Hooty hoo! I attack with a 17, baby. Bleed, baby. Bleed. All right, Dave rolls a d20, gets a 13, adds 4 for a total of 17. The GM also rolls a d20, getting a 15, and adds a +6, resulting in a total defense of 21. So in this case, the goblin's defense is greater than his attack roll. So in other words, the goblin got a 21, the player got a 17. However, the goblin has a shield. So because he had a shield, that meant the shield took some of the damage. So in this case, instead of doing full damage, El Ravager is going to do half damage. Normally he rolls 4d4 plus 3, and now he's only going to roll 2d4 plus 3. Dave rolls the damage, and he gets a 4 and a 4. But these are penetrating, so that means he gets to roll each die again and subtract 1 from the result. This time, he rolls a 3 and a 4, and he subtracts 1 from each of those, getting a 2 and a 3. However, since this actual roll penetrated, again, he rolled another 4, he gets to roll this again and apply a -1. So he rolls a 3 and gets a -1. So anyways, he basically explodes a bunch of dice, and he does 11 points of damage, okay, with this critical fumble from the attacker free counterattack. All right. Dave, make a competing roll. There's a chance that you've just destroyed the goblin's shield with your blow. Got it. I roll a 15, BA. Okay, the goblin's shield shatters to bits as he casts it aside. So remember we talked about the shield's damage absorption value? Well, for a small shield like this, taking more than 8 points of damage in a single blow is a chance to see if the shield would be splattered and shintered, and so it explodes. All right? But the shield does absorb some of the damage, and the armor reduces another 2 points of damage. So as a result, it was 18 damage. The shield absorbs 4 points of it. The armor absorbs 2 points of it. And so the goblin still takes 12 points of damage, which, by the way, is almost enough to, the creature only has 20 hit points. So definitely it's a big blow, but also the creature's gonna have to make a threshold of pain check. But because he did more than 10 points of damage, your blow is also enough to force it back, and you knock it back a full 5 feet. Dude, you knocked that guy all the way back to 4th edition. He also fails his threshold of pain check and basically collapses to the ground in a shuddering heap, which I think is an important thing to stop and note it. Basically, in a fight in Hackmaster, there's kind of 2 ways to beat a foe or to beat all your foes. You can either hit them for little bits of damage and eventually make their hit points go from full all the way down to 0. We call this playing D&D, right? This is the way we've all done it forever. The other way to win a fight in Hackmaster is if it could be the very first blow of the fight. If you can get one big blow against your opponent and do enough damage in a single hit, the creature could essentially automatically be taken out of the fight. They're not dead, but they are essentially out for 15, 20, 30 seconds. And you even have the option, if you're not engaged in fighting for your life, to just straight up, coup de grace them and kill them. So let's take a look at the math on that. Dave's 18 gross points of damage is a knockback, since 10 points is enough to knock back a small creature. He knocks the creature back a full 5 feet. Notice if he had done 20 damage, it would have knocked him back 10 feet. Furthermore, the goblin's threshold of pain is only 8 damage. And since he took 12 damage, even after absorbing some with his shield and his armor, he has to make a threshold of pain check. The GM needed to roll a 6 or lower, and he rolled an 11. So the goblin is not only knocked back 5 feet, but now he is down and writhing in pain for 25 seconds. Assuming he is not somehow otherwise killed in the interim, he will re-enter the combat and the fracas at 31 seconds. That's all you got, punk? Huh? That's all you brought? Okay. Save some for later. We still got 3 of these guys to take out. Okay, continuing on the count. On 7, the goblin you initially attack strikes back at El Ravager. Meanwhile, the other 2 goblins move past him to get at the rest of you. Bob, Knuckles, our dwarf thief here, is still too surprised to defend him as one of them attacks. Yeah, but I can attack on 8. Give me your worst BA. Now, in this case, Knuckles is still kind of surprised. It doesn't have his full defense up because his initiative has not come up yet. And so instead of rolling a D20 for his defense, he only rolls a D8 for his defense. BA, our game master, rolls a D20 plus 3 and gets a total of 12. Bob only gets a total of 3. And so our Knuckles, the rogue, dwarf rogue, has failed to defend, and the goblin will roll 2d6 minus 1 damage for a total of 6 points of damage. Even though he cannot use his shield because he is still surprised, his armor still reduces this damage by 2 points. And so instead of taking 6, he takes 4 points of damage. And again, Bob would note that on his character sheet that he has taken 4 points of damage and he has a 4-point wound. But of course, we didn't get into this, but Bob is a rogue, and rogues have luck points, which they can spend to modify dice rolls and to absorb damage that they take. So he goes, 4 points? Yeah, right. I'm spending 4 luck points. Goblin's lame attack ricochets off the leather strap of my backpack, and it totally absorbs all the damage. And dip it into those luck points a little early, aren't you? Fine. Mark off 4 luck points. The goblin looks surprised as he thought he had struck home, but it reflected. He growls with disapproval. And again, the goblin attacked on 7. His weapon speed is 8, so that goblin can attack again at 15. All right. So combat continues, and they give you a pretty lengthy comic. We're not going to go through all of this. But as you can see, it is complicated. It is engaging, but there's a certain pattern and beauty to this. And I should also note that the key thing here is nobody has a turn, right? I mean, sure, we saw the beginning of the fight and they kind of rolled badly on their initiative, which makes sense. They were the ones being ambushed by goblins. But by and large, your character is going to be moving, falling back, pressing forward, tacking, and you're going to be doing this every single, second, basically, on the battlefield. So there's really no concept of like waiting for your turn. Additionally, when you're attacked, I know this seems small and minor, but if, you're engaged in a melee, you just attacked, and then another monster comes up and attacks you, you're at least getting to roll a die. You have to roll your defense, right? And so you feel more engaged because you're rolling to see how well you defend. And if you roll a really high defense value, or they roll a nat 1 when they're attacking you, you even get to make a free attack. We might call it an attack of opportunity. And so there's an element there of like feeling like a little bit more engaged, and you're never just like, okay, my turn is done. I know that I can go to the bathroom. I've got 15 minutes. I've got, 10 minutes, 20 minutes until my turn. It doesn't really work that way, right? The combat is kind of always going. And this is the basic game. The advanced game has some even more sticky moves. Now, we did not get into monsters, okay? We did not get into cleric spells, all right? Things like alleviate trauma, bless, cure wounds, cure trifling wound, cure trivial wound, cure minor wound, cure small wound, cure light wound, and cure lesser wound. We did not get into the mage spells, such as charm and firefinger and enrage and bash door and bottomless pouch, copycat and motion bore, and the skipping Betty fireball. So we did not get into all of the miscellanies of even the basic set of rules. However, hopefully we have at least sort of covered the bases of what Hackmaster 5th edition is trying to do. It's trying to be kind of a fun, not taking itself too seriously version of kind of classic traditional, fantasy role playing. There are parts of it that are purposefully kind of numerical and crunchy just because, well, ask anybody who plays BattleTech and plays, or Warhammer 40K or any of these really complicated kind of war games or board games. There's definitely, no doubt about it, a sort of war gamey feel. But I'd like to point out that outside of combat, the game is just, this is the same thing that Smith always says about 4th edition. Yes, 4th edition has the attack powers. 4th edition has the, at wills and the dailies and the encounters and all this other stuff, right? But that is true. And that does affect the game. It has action points and healing surges and move minor actions. But that is the combat. 4th edition was taking the combat part of D&D and making it have a lot more, things to do, buttons to push, levers to pull. But outside of combat, D&D 4th edition, like Hackmaster, is basically just a TTRPG system. You've got some ability scores, you've got some skills. You walk around, you explore things, you talk to people, you poke at stuff. Sometimes you make a skill check, right? I mean, the other part of the game basically functions pretty much like any other RPG. Whether that's Dragonbane, Call of Cthulhu, or D&D. You're just rolling your check and seeing what happens, and describing things and moving around. And when combat engages in Hackmaster, it's a little bit more advanced. There's absolutely, there's no doubt about that. But there's also something to be said about the combat system maybe feeling more realistic, giving you an opportunity to sort of react. I mean, I've talked about this a lot on this channel, but, one of my personal, bugbears is that, I really dislike it. I really dislike it when you have a combat. Let me do a grid here real quick. There we go. I really dislike it when you have a combat and it's like, okay, fighter. And this is my friend, the mage. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the cool fighter. And then, we roll initiative or whatever. And there's a monster right here. And it's a big, scary monster. And I'm like, yeah, cool. And then the monster's like, okay, I'm going to take a stride action. And then I'm going to take a stride action. And then I'm going to obliterate your mage. Whenever that happens, I just get really frustrated. Stream is doing the stream thing again. YouTube needs to get its shit straight. Yeah, again, sorry about that, folks. It doesn't look like it's from my end. I don't know if there's a way I might be able to change what server I'm connected to, but it does seem like YouTube has been crapping the bed lately. I apologize. If you're watching on the VOD, this apparently won't be an issue. Okay. So basically, I really don't like it when, one of the artifacts, one of the unfortunate truths of playing a turn-based initiative system is that, essentially my fighter is just standing there watching as a big ogre, walks around me and crushes my lightly armored mage, right? That really bugs me, right? That is something that I am irritated by. So what I would like to have happen is like this big ogre wants to go crush the mage. So the ogre moves here, but then I move here and the mage falls back. And then the ogre goes this way and my fighter goes that way and the mage goes that way. And then the ogre comes to here and then my fighter moves to here and engages the ogre. And now we're fighting. And by the way, once you're fighting, if like the ogre wants to the ogre can't just leave and just, without suffering some severe consequences because he's got a guy with a big sword or a big axe in his face. It could be really problematic and bad for him. So that kind of chess game of the ogre trying to get past me, again, it's something that I think is cool. And I personally think that's a really fun element of the game as we sort of look at how the combat works. Because again, in a standard, D&D game or a Pathfinder game, it's like, okay, I might have not even rolled that bad of initiative, but the ogre went first. And so he just kind of goes, boop, boop, crush. And it just feels silly. It's like, I'm trying to imagine in the fiction, what is my fighter doing? Is he just like literally watching the ogre like walk past him? I'm not surprised. Hell, my fighter could have been the one who started the fight. And then the ogre just rolled higher on, like my fighter was like, then you die. And then the fighter was like, I draw my sword and I'm going to attack him. And then it's like, okay, well, the ogre rolled higher than you on initiative. So it goes first and it just walks around you while you stand there and gets to your mage and starts wailing into it. Critical hit on the mage. Oh, that's going to leave a mark. Right. So again, it's very silly to me. That is something that I've always kind of been like, I don't like it. Hackmaster does solve that issue. And again, I hopefully have done a good job of impressing upon you two things. Number one, the game obviously has some elements that are designed to just kind of be like, eye roll and sort of be like, this is funny because they're trying to make fun of some of the classic tropes of D&D, and try to like, kind of be like, and they're also trying to lean a little bit more into the fact that the name of their game is Hackmaster. They kind of want it to be a little bloody and gory and a little bit over the top in that way. But this is not 4th edition. 5th edition Hackmaster, is not a deliberate attempt to create a satirical parody. And I hopefully have illustrated that while some of the systems may be a little bit cumbersome, they do produce an interesting outcome. And I think it can really create a very strong feeling of verisimilitude because the simulation score is very high and shields and armor and moving and speeds all function in a way that make you kind of go, yeah, this makes sense. This kind of makes sense how this would work, So again, you're not going to find a ton of people who are playing this game. If you are, go to Gen Con, go to Jolly, go to Dave Kenzer and say, hey, Knights of Last Call said I should check it out. They're almost always there running games. So, but yeah, it is a kind of an important, funny game in the history of our hobby. Not only because Knights of the Dinner Table was just such like an epic and famous, cartoon comic. And by the way, I recommend you go check out Knights of the Dinner Table comic books. I haven't read them in years, but they are really awesome. I grew up loving them, and they make, they were still when D&D was kind of like not a mainstream thing, so there's like a lot of inside jokes and a lot of like inside baseball humor, you know what I mean? And so I always appreciated that because it was like a joke aimed at me, and I really, really like that. So just awesome, funny. I recommend them. I can't recommend them enough. And then again, Hackmaster 4th edition was kind of the beginning of the OSR. It is, in a way, it was the first retro clone. And they did it as a parody because they didn't think that they could get away with it any other way. But them printing it made people realize, hey, you know what? We could print this too. And it doesn't have to be a parody. We could just copy the rules. And that kicked off the whole OSR movement. And that has now such expanded into the new OSR movement. And, in a way, like all the Shadow Darks and all that other stuff kind of owe their existence in a way to the original Hackmaster. But even Hackmaster itself kind of inspired itself and said, you know what? We're happy we made this game, but we get it. We made it to be a joke. But we really do want to make a real game. We don't want to strip out all the fun and the zaniness and sort of the craziness. And we're going to leave a good chunk of it in. But, it's there.
Bob tipped $10. Can you show the stats on the gazebo? That monster is nuts. We totally got robbed by it.
Bob, tipping $10. Can I show the stats on the gazebo? Bob, unfortunately, I cannot. I do not have the Monster Manual PDF. I don't have any of these books on PDF. So I don't have a way, except for Basic, because it was free. But I'd have to buy the Hacklopedia of Beasts, which, by the way, is a gorgeous book if you ever see it. It's called the Hacklopedia. I think it's called the Hacklopedia of Beasts. It's one of the most gorgeous books. It has this like green scale cover. It's pretty cool. Looks like a dragon. It's really awesome. But the joke, the very most famous Knights of the Dinner Table comic is, where they fight a gazebo because they don't know what the word gazebo means. And so they think it means that it's some monster. And, the GM's like, yeah, blah, 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 you see in the field and there's a gazebo. And they're like, gazebo? Oh, shit. What is that? He's like, well, it's standing out there. He's like, oh, it's playing hard to get. And the players freak out because they think it's a horrible monster and it's just a gazebo. But of course, part of the fun of this game is they're like, we're going to actually make it into a Vire monster. So that's pretty cool, Bob. But thank you for the tip, Bob. I appreciate it. Appreciate that. Appreciate you. Thank you for the support. So is Hackmaster the best initiative system? It's a great question. In terms of realism, yes. I mean, short of a actual literal real-time FPS system, this is about as close as you're going to get and still have some semblance of order and balance. Now that being said, it is the best initiative system in the sense of verisimilitude, in the sense of simulationism. There are other initiative systems that I really do enjoy, but I'm not going to pretend for a second that they are quote unquote realistic or make any sense. I love the Fabula Ultima revised system. I love the alternating activation methodology, but that doesn't really make any sense. I just understand that it is a gamist construct and it's not trying to be anything other than a gamist construct. Which I appreciate. And as I said before, we were debating waiting a lot on Dragonbane, right? That was kind of like the theme of that channel was me complaining about waiting, and why I thought it was really weird. Well, guess what? In Hackmaster, you can wait. Like for example, let's say our fighter initiative is a 2. And the ogre got a 4. So I'm doing the action count. I get to 1, nobody moves. I get to 2. My fighter could move. He could start moving. He could start engaging the ogre. But the fighter says, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna see what the ogre does first. So then it proceeds to 3. And the fighter goes, you know what? I'm gonna take a step forward, but I'm not gonna do anything else. Okay. I'm waiting on the ogre. I want to see what the ogre does first. We get to 4. Now the ogre can start moving. The ogre is deciding he wants to break left. So the ogre starts going this way. The fighter could have moved. And he's like, I'm still waiting. He's like, yeah, I'm going to keep waiting. I really want to see what this ogre is doing. So we go to 5. And the ogre moves over to here. And the fighter says, okay, I'm going to start engaging the ogre. I've seen enough. I can see that he's going for the mage. Okay. So then on 6, the fighter starts moving towards the ogre starts moving towards the fighter, and then on 7, they probably engage each other. But, our fighter gave up 3 or 4 seconds that he could have been using to shoot a bow or pull out a weapon or get a shield out or just charge straight at the ogre. That's waiting. That's realistic waiting because you have the initiative and you're waiting and time is passing and you're losing that time, but you're using it to gain more information about what decision to make. So that is real waiting. Ken says, Derek, thank you for turning around this game. It looks fun. All right, Ken. I mean, I don't have any financial incentive in it, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Again, we're just trying to educate and entertain here, right? And inform. Elia says, this game does look playable. I especially like the way combat flows. Jackal already campaigning for an actual play. Mr. Brandis says, I do recommend looking at the Hackmaster live plays and seeing combat, like real combat, like played at a table. It's playable and clicks pretty quick once you see play it. It's just not D20, but after that, you're good, right? You need to just take your concepts of D20 and turns and initiative order and throw them out the door. And the game even said that. They're like, in some ways, people who have never played before have an easier time because they're like, oh, this works like the real world, not like some artificial construct that we call initiative. Knights of the Dinner Table is very much still a thing. The Bag of Holding run is really good. The Bundles of Trouble are really good. All good. Really punk idea behind it that I really vibe with. Exactly, Thomas. It's a little bit irreverent. It's definitely a little bit stick it to the man. It definitely is. There's definitely a punk vibe there for sure. I could appreciate this all academically, but actually tempted to play it feel like punching myself in the brain. It could, but again, it remains to be seen. Yes, Gazebo is from this. The sticker on the front that is the Eye of the Dragon cheapens it a bit. Yeah, okay, I could buy that. I remember it looking cooler. Maybe the material is not that great, but I remember it looking really cool. Either way, it's very cool. It's very classic. Okay, well, we almost went 3 hours just because we were explaining everything and talking about everything. And again, I know we only covered the basics of it, but there's a lot of unlearning to do. And you all showed your support big time. So we are going to cover some more of the advanced Hackmaster stuff. We'll probably, again, as we always do, talk with our patrons and see what they're interested in learning more about. Of course, we'll get Mr. Smith on here because he's always been a fan of this game, and for whatever reason has recently dived back into it. Maybe the patrons could convince Smith to run some Hackmaster on the Discord. I didn't say it, but I didn't say he would, but maybe they could get him. But yeah, nice to see this crazy ass game get some love. Yeah, I mean, here's the key thing. I've always loved this company. I've always thought like they had their hearts were in the right spot. I always thought that they're, again, I mean, do I have like in the Hacklopedia of Beasts, where is it? All right, in the Combatant's Guide to Slaughtering Foes. Okay, these are in the Game Master guides too. There's literally, again, this is 4th edition. This was the parody edition. Okay, let me be very clear about that. In the back of the book, they had these Hackmaster coupons. Okay, that the GM could hand out as like a reward for a thing, and they're actually perforated. Like you actually tear them out. I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. You automatically succeed at a skill check. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. Gain the ability to strike creatures only hit by magic weapons for a day. The report of my death was an exaggeration. What does this thing here say? You are brought back to life and you have a minor instinct. So anyways, like the game, they literally came with like coupons that you could hand out, to players in order to sort of, again, this was the 4th edition of the game. This was the joke edition of the game. But come on, the subtitle of this, driving your enemies before you and hearing the lamentation of their women. I mean, come on. That's awesome. But I loved him for that. I mean, it was funny and it was a fun read, and it was fun to laugh. It was part of that era when D&D was still kind of in the closet, and it was fun to have it was when other people made fun of D&D, it was hurtful, and it was an attack. But when people who loved the game were making this parody version of it and poking fun at all the things that we all kind of thought were stupid but we loved, it was nice. So I've always really, and of course I thought the comics did this in spades. In fact, one of my favorite Knights of the Dinner Table comics of all time is there's another group of gamers called the Black Hand, who are kind of like the Knights rivals in the local, Muncie, Indiana gaming scene. And they're led by this guy named Nitro. And Nitro is trying to strike back at the Knights. So he sends them this like fake invite to like an exclusive LARP of like new high tech LARP event. And he sends them to this super divey biker bar. And so the guys go. Sarah doesn't go, but BA goes, Brian goes, Bob goes, Dave goes. And they go in thinking it's like a LARP. But the rest of them are just bikers and like biker gang members. And it's just like, they're sitting there like starting shit with the bikers because they think that they're all just part of a LARP. And then like Bob starts getting beat up and Dave is like, come on, you're not even giving him a chance to parry, like he's like, what's going on? And it's just like so funny to me. Like I remember that comic very, very well. Especially Brian is really funny in it. So anyways, it's just crazy. Like, how Knights of the Dinner Table for me was just like such a huge part of, some of my early Gen Cons and my early, Dragon magazines, and I loved it. And again, Hackmaster, started, in my opinion, the OSR. So I don't really think that's an opinion. I think it did. And then there's 5th edition, which love it or leave it. it's out there and it does what it does, and you can like it or you can not like it. So ultimately, Roll for Combat, is the game playable? Yes. I think that if you enjoy the very strategic simulationist minutia of combat, the same way that I imagine this is very similar to people who play BattleTech with all the rules on tabletop, managing heat systems and stuff like that. I think it's very similar in that respect. So, Bob, see, this turns out Bob actually got a huge payday from Free League. They sent him much kroner, and he's just, that's all the hype there. Fantasy BattleTech is apt. Yeah. Cause like in the advanced rules, maybe in the basic rules too, but in the advanced rules for sure, your character literally has like facing, like if you're facing this way and a monster comes up behind you, they are attacking you in the rear and they get a big bonus to attack you. You have to like spend your turn, you have to like spend a second to like turn around. You know what I mean? Like it because it's real time. It's like a real time strategy game. So it's pretty crazy. There's a lot of things that some people might hear that and go, that's awesome. And other people hear that and go, oh my God, that sounds horrible. And again, I think, Fantasy BattleTech is kind of the vibe that we're going for. All right. Well, 10 o'clock, I'm going to wrap it up, and no gaming for us. Unfortunately, this Friday, we made Forbidden Lands characters last week. I was really excited. I think the group made a really cool group. I'm really excited to see them play. But our host is occupied this weekend. This was known and planned in advance. So I'm going to be playing Magic. I'm going to be going up to the local game store, and I'm going to get a chance to team draft some Murders at Karlov Manor. I've heard good things about the set, so I'm looking forward to doing that draft. Also this week, speaking of tactical combat, I also finally got my release of the Old World. I got my big Bretonnian box set. I've got my big blue book. I've got Forces of Fantasy. I've got Ravening Hordes. I've got the Bretonnian and the Tomb Kings book. I am just inundated with Warhammer Fantasy Battles again. I am almost beside myself with how excited I am just to be flipping through Warhammer books again. I hated Age of Sigmar. I got out of it. I did not get into it at all. I could not. I didn't like it at all. But I was a huge Warhammer Fantasy fan. I got into it in 4th edition and kind of skipped 5th edition. And then I played 6th edition, 7th edition, and 8th edition unto death. And then they killed it. So, but now it's back. Warhammer, the Old World. And I am really excited about it. So hopefully going to start painting again. And I'm really excited to try that out. So it's a good times, I mean, Warhammer, I got a whole new box of minis. I've got new lists to make. I can pull my high elves and my dwarves and my orcs and gobos. I can pull them out of storage where they've been for literally like 10 years. I can dust them off. I've just started a new D&D or a new RPG campaign. We're playing Forbidden Lands, which I'm really excited about. And I kickstarted it 6 years ago. So about time that I get to play it. I've got an incredible community. We've got Dragonbane games. We've got AD&D first edition games. We've got Pathfinder 2 games. We've got Call of Cthulhu games. We've got what do we got? We have so many different games going on in my community. It's difficult for me to even keep track of them all. Bob's running a Dragonbane game. We've got Traveler games. We've got Blades in the Dark games. We've got Scum and Villainy games. We've got Fabula Ultima games. We've got 4th edition campaigns. I mean, we've just got so many awesome games going on, and I'm just totally here for it. And it's awesome, and we have an incredible community. So really, really looking forward to that. And it's a good time to be a gamer, I guess, Jackal says that Jackal, of course, being a member of our Patreon, ran MCDM RPG again. I think Jackal, you've run that a couple of times, right? For different people. At this point, C says, the number of games going on is a threat to my marriage. You know what? That is not the first time. Listen, it won't be the first time. Okay. That number one, that's definitely not the first time we've heard this, but also let me be very frank. And I totally respect people's decisions who have to do this. We have had a number of patrons who have had to come and say, I have to quit the Patreon because I am playing so many RPGs and I am talking about so many RPGs, and I am buying so many new RPGs. It has become a problem with my domestic partner. Also, I would like to see my kids again. I'm going to have to step away. And some people step away permanently. Some people step away for 6 months, 9 months, and come back. But it has happened before because there's just so much going on. Even though we have a small community, it's a very, very passionate community, which is great. Really, really, really love it. I don't think Dragonbane is going anywhere. And Dragonbane, in its way, Dragonbane, in my opinion, this might sound kind of controversial. Dragonbane is like the opposite coin of Hackmaster 5th edition. They are both sincere games, right? They're both sincere. They're both kind of old school. There's an element of kind of like crazy fun. But whereas Dragonbane takes a very simplistic, basic approach to it, Hackmaster takes a much more crunchy, chewy, numbery approach to it. And there's nothing wrong with either of those. It's just whatever's you like. In fact, the skill system in Dragonbane is basically the same skill system as Hackmaster. They're both percentage roll under, and as your skill gets higher, it becomes harder to raise. So the skill system, identical, basically. And so it's kind of interesting in that way, it's in that. So again, it's like our good friend Kaz always says, he's very sincere. It is not serious. And that's Dragonbane, right? It's got Darkwing Duck on the cover, for God's sake. But that's Hackmaster too. Sincere, but not serious. So, Dragonbane was actually what made me dig out Hackmaster again. It was the skill system. Yeah. So, and again, the skill system is basically just basic role playing. It's Call of Cthulhu. It's, RuneQuest. It's percentage roll under. So, Dragonbane used to be percentage roll under, and at some point they just divided everything by 5. And when you did take a percentage system and divide it by 5, you get a D20 roll under system. So it's really just the same thing, just without the percent, 100 gradients instead of 20. So, all right. Anyways, so new Warhammer book to read, new Magic set to draft, new campaign to prep for, thriving Discord community, more videos, new videos. This year, I really want to try to start doing more videos, like 15-minute videos. Not because I'm trying to milk the algorithm. I've just got a lot of people who go, Derek, we love the show. We love Bob. We love Smith. We love you. I can't watch 8 hours of content, man, a week. It's just too much. And you know what? I respect that. And our shows don't really lend themselves as well to like quick little sound bites. A lot of times our shows take a lot of room to breathe, and there's a lot of like nuance and tangents. We don't really make content that's like clippable. Sometimes we get some clips, but it's pretty tough. A lot of times it's a very big conversation. So there is an element to me that really wants to make sure that everybody that is engaged in our community can experience this, So, so how about 8 hours and 15 minutes content? Well, again, the idea is, in theory, you all know this, you're watching, right? You get me with you all here in chat. We could talk forever. Smith and I could go off forever. We have before. Smith and I literally have spent 12 hours before in a room or in a parking lot waiting with keys in our hand, just talking about D&D until it was like 4 a.m. And then it was like, oh yeah, we should go home. We left work at 5 and now it's like 2 a.m. And hey, are you hungry? Yeah, I'm hungry. And then we would go to Denny's and we would get, food, and then we'd keep talking about D&D. Anyways, long story short, see, there's a lot of tangents. I think there's something to be said about hunkering down and telling a complete story in 15 minutes, because I think for some people, that's the only way that they're going to be able to consume our content. I mean, even at times 2 speed, Grim Prism, our 3-hour stream is still an hour, 90 minutes, and hour 30. And that's still way too long for so many people. And I really respect people's time, and I really want to make sure that there's an opportunity for everybody. But to be clear and to be honest, I'm already live streaming a bunch. I'm running an RPG game. I've got my job. I've got my dogs. Making a video is not always the easiest thing. There's people out there who make like 1 video a week and they don't live stream. I don't know what they're doing with the rest of their day, but hey, good on them. So anyways, a lot of cool stuff coming, and I'm really excited for it. So, more Hackmaster to come. And, also we're going to try to figure out how to do this Marvel multiverse, even though they don't have a fucking PDF. I may have to just like bite the bullet and buy it on fucking roll 20 or something and feel stupid because it's like $35 for it. It's like completely dumb. But you know, it is what it is. So, let's just say that it's already going in with a strike against it because I'm mad about the fact that they don't have it available as a PDF. All right, everybody. That'll do it for me. I will talk to you next week, next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace out, everybody. Have a good one.